Oh, good afternoon to everyone in the room, and hello, whatever time zone you may be online at the moment. And really thank you very much to the organisers to give me the opportunity to introduce this session. And I think it's a really great thing now to see the combination across the GXPs, if you like, within this sector of combining it into a single event. So I just thought I'd just cast our minds back a few years now. I'd say I was stood on this very stage, but the venue was different at the time. But I remember back in 2018, myself and colleagues visiting the US to really kick off this collaboration that we now have around symposia and meetings. And the meeting that we held all those years ago before disruption of pandemics, where we really focused on clinical trials and data integrity. But even now, just looking back and the experience of working with our inspectors and in the pharmacovigilance area of just how relevant that data integrity discussion was then and still is now, as PV really does really get involved in that level of data and just the importance of the compliance and reliability just to help inform decisions. So even then, you know, I think we were really touching on these key subjects and these key items for an ever-evolving world of regulation and conduct of all these different activities related towards medicines. So I just thought before we get into what's going to happen this afternoon, I'd just reflect what's been happening over the last few days. And I think these themes are relevant for whichever area that we're looking at and discussing. That, you know, we've talked a great deal already about collaboration, and not only the collaboration between us as regulators, but also that collaboration between us, industry, you, the stakeholders. And also, I think it's been really refreshing that we've heard a lot of talk about patients as we're having these discussions, and how that's the important thing at the end of everything that we do. So that whole collaboration theme has really come through, and also how we can improve and get better and working together as a community around the delivery of safe medicines. And of course, all of that is really built on information sharing. So you'll hear about how our agencies work together to be more effective and more efficient, and also how important information is, especially for when we're looking at safety. And I think, again, we'll just touch on how pharmacovigilance really does, it's an information game in effect. And when you start combining all these different themes, it really just shows how all of these three areas are so important. And then this week, we've already looked at the future and new approaches, and pharmacovigilance and compliance is no different in that there have been changes, and there will be continue to be changes to how we work, how technology influences how we look at things, how systems and inspection approaches have evolved, and how that will continue to do so. So even though we're now on day 3 and the PV session, I think it just shows how all of these topics intertwine themselves across all of the regulated areas that we look at. So even though we're in a new session, it's really an extension of what we've been talking about all through the week. So I think when I was just pulling together, trying to work out what to say here, and just discussions with some of the team back in the UK, I think this collaboration theme really does underpin what we're talking about with pharmacovigilance, in that it is in effect the ultimate collaboration, in that we have the patients and the healthcare providers, we have the pharma company, the organisations, then us, the regulator. And actually it doesn't work without collaboration, because we're all reliant on this transfer of information. You know, it's a cycle of trying to find the signals, the events, and the organisations and adapting, and the regulator having the oversight. And of course, importantly, the patient plays such a key part here of actually informing and starting that information share, and then obviously being the recipient of advice and changes to guidance to patient information. So without this collaboration, the system doesn't work. And I think it's very easy for someone like myself that spent their regulatory career very much looking at clinical and preclinical and building up to the all-important approval, that it's quite easy for people like myself to forget the importance of where pharmacovigilance steps in, of expanding that data set about safety, of the ability to have a larger population to get the data and the information to inform the safety decisions. Because certainly as working in the development phase, we've got a limited population of where that data comes from. So the power of this system is so important to patient safety. It's really important that we make sure that the systems work, that they're compliant, and that there's good quality data to inform those decision makings. So again, reflecting back to my presentation earlier this week, that the whole decision-making process of having the right information, the capability to make these safety decisions, a pharmacovigilance system is critical to enable us to do that. So I think that really does show the power of communication and collaboration. And without that, these things don't work. And I think the other thing that really comes home as a powerful message here as well, this really is a truly global activity, in that we're not just talking about the FDA is only concerned with data from the US, the MHRA only concerned with data from the UK, Health Canada only from Canada. It really is about sourcing all this information as widely as possible to inform those decisions. And this global activity as well it's not purely our responsibility to have the right systems and regulation and oversight in place. And we're increasingly seeing now that this really is a global regulatory activity, and the opportunities there for us as international regulators to partner with more and more regulators from around the world to make sure we're all have got reliable data and harmonise as much as we can to make sure those systems are in place to really, really build good quality informed decision making. So what we're going to see today, I think this is a great start to this event for pharmacovigilance and coming into this family of events this year. So again, we're going to hear about international collaboration. So we'll hear how our agencies are working together to really maximise all of our experience and resources. As with the rest of the week, we'll look to the future and learnings that we've had and the direction of travel for how these inspections and the oversight will be put into place as we move forward and work together. And then as usual, there will be updates. Part of these events are to enable us to inform you and to the widest audience possible to get our current thinking across and point you in the right direction. But equally, hopefully these presentations will prompt questions, whether it be online or in the room, that can feed back to us now. And then the panels will be able to talk things through, offer advice, or point you in the right direction. And it all builds into this collaborative model and working together to make sure that we all can work with good systems, good data, and work together to the ultimate goal of ensuring that there's safe medicines and that patients are safe. So my last message really, before I hand over to the teams, is please enjoy the rest of this event. I'm sure it's going to prompt some really good discussions, ideas, and we can really share the expertise that we're going to have up on the stage for the rest of the afternoon. So that's me done. So hopefully this sets up the day for everyone. And now I'd like to hand over to Carolyn, who will moderate the first session this afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. So as he said, I'm Carolyn Volpe, and I'm the team leader for the Pharmacovigilance Compliance team at the FDA. And I'm really excited to be moderating the final afternoon of the symposium. It's been great. Now, like Stephen said, we're going to focus on pharmacovigilance in the post-marketing setting. And, I think that this is the point in the drug's life cycle where the drug is now being used in the real world. This is being used by patients of all age groups, races, with concomitant medications, and even used off-label. And this is a critical time when we become aware of the safety issues not seen in the clinical trials. And to make sure that we're all aware of the safety issues as they emerge, the next presenters will discuss how regulatory agencies across the globe are collaborating. First, we have Claire Longman, an expert pharmacovigilance inspector from MHRA. She will discuss several projects focusing on international collaboration and the goals of these projects. Next, we will have Sherry Boyce. She's a director of the Division of Enforcement and Post-Marketing Safety at FDA, and she's pre-recorded her updates to the PICS Good Pharmacovigilance Practice Expert Circle. And finally, we'll have Paul Bellegeron, the Regional Regulatory Compliance and Enforcement Specialist from Health Canada, and he's going to discuss some experiences with the GVP joint inspections. So Claire, I'll let you get started.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Carolyn, and thank you everybody for welcoming me here today. It really is a pleasure to come and speak to you all. I've realised that I have the shift just after lunch, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to keep you awake, and all those in Europe who are joining online, you'll all just be getting ready for your dinner. So hopefully we can make this talk as interesting as possible to keep everybody listening and interested. And I'm going to be talking to you about international collaboration, really from a regulator's perspective. So let's begin. So I think we can all agree that pharmacovigilance is a global connection that we all have. And we all do this role for one real common goal, and that is to make sure that medicines that are available to patients are safe and effective as possible. Well, I hope that's the common goal that we all have in pharmacovigilance. And your systems that you have, your PV systems, they are global in nature. You are collecting that adverse event data from all around the world, and that's feeding into our regulatory systems. And that's really important for regulators to make sure that we are collecting that information on a global nature, one, because we share that common goal for medicines to be as safe as possible, but also in our respective populations to make sure that we have that ability to look at that adverse event data and make sure the benefit risk profile is as favourable as possible. And therefore it makes sense that as regulators we collaborate more. We start to discuss that information between each other. We use that to ensure patient safety, and we also use it so that we can reduce the burden on you as market authorization holders, and that you're able to do your jobs to the best effect as possible without having too much regulatory burden on you. So today I'm going to start with an overview on that international collaboration, and I'm going to start with looking at some current projects, really at a medicinal regulator viewpoint, so not just in the inspectorate. And then I'll be looking at some of the international groups that are around for regulations, and then concentrating on some international agreements. And this really I'm focusing on international agreements that we have in our compliance teams and across inspectorates. And then I'll finish with some working examples and some training initiatives. So hopefully that will be an insight into some of the up and coming steps that we take and the way we're moving. So obviously I'm talking from a MHRA perspective here. And then once I'm finished, what the intention is that Sherry will then talk about some particular aspects of how inspectors collaborate, and then Paul will give some specific examples as well. So I'm going to start off with the Access Consortium. So this is a consortium that the MHRA joined in January 2021. And it's a consortium made up of 5 regulators, so Australia, Canada, Singapore, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. And the aim of this consortium is to share research and improve timely patient access to high quality and safe and effective medicines. And The consortium really aims to explore different ways in which information can be shared, and it has several working groups. And one of those working groups is looking at how inspection outcomes and reports can be shared and across regulators. They're currently operating under the 2021 to 2024 plan. And one of those commitments that they've made is to look at GMP inspections, so good manufacturing inspection reports, and how those inspection outcomes can be shared. So hopefully the outcome from that will be favourable, and we can start to look at how we can move that forwards in other GXPs. The second project I wanted to talk about is Project Orbis, and I find this quite interesting. And this provides a framework for the concurrent submission of market applications across a number of regulators. And this is particularly for oncology products. So the regulators involved in this are the same 5 as from the Access Consortium, plus the US-FDA who lead on this project, and also Brazil. And this coordinates the submission for review of market authorizations and extensions to licenses for cancer medicines. And the aim is to, for a market authorization to submit that one application, and then it gets submitted to all of those regulators at the same time to be reviewed. The thing about this project is, although those submissions are all put in together, it therefore reduces burden on the MAHs. They just have to submit one submission. It does still allow regulators to make sovereign decisions. And I think that's something that I want to highlight, that although when we talk about international collaboration, I think sometimes we think that we all have to make the same decision. But actually, I think Project Orbis presents an opportunity where decisions can be made in their own right, and each regulator is deciding whether they license the medicine or not. But the actual burden on the MAH is reduced by just making that one submission. And Project Orbis has been successful. I think there's around 20 medicines that have been licensed through this route currently. So just some other international collaborations that I wanted to mention that impact on the inspection teams and pharmacovigilance. So ICH, we always have representation on ICH guideline updates, whether that's through the inspection teams themselves, or we have other delegates from the agency. So sometimes our safety and surveillance colleagues will join those, and then they'll feed back any information and ask for our input in the inspectorate where required. We have input into the CEOMS working group. So at the moment we have colleagues from safety and surveillance in the MHRA who are sitting on the AI CEOMS working group for pharmacovigilance. And then PICS. Now this is the Pharmaceutical Inspectorate Cooperation Scheme. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, and Sherry's going to talk about in much more detail, and then Paul will also. So I'm not going to go into much detail, but this is a scheme that is set up specifically for inspectors. Regulators sign up to this scheme, and it's a way that we can benefit from best practice sharing. We look at hot topics and training, and look at how we can train each other as well. So it's a really good scheme. And I'm deputy chair of one of the working groups there, but I won't go into any more detail on that because Sherry and Paul will talk about that a bit more later. So ICMA, this is the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities. Now this is a voluntary scheme, and it's an executive level. And the aim of this is to bring regulatory authorities together to look at where there may be similar challenges across different regulatory bodies who authorise medicines, and also looking at ways to harmonise. And there's a few pharmacovigilance work streams that sit under this. One of them is looking at vaccines, one of them is looking at increased AE reporting, and the other is looking at big data. And then we have a lot of bilateral agreements. Now they sit across the MHRA at a regulatory level, but also within the compliance teams also. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those bilateral agreements that we have within the compliance teams. So we have, obviously, I'm here today talking to you at the US-FDA, Health Canada and MHRA Joint Symposium. We have bilateral agreements with both the US-FDA and Health Canada, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here talking with colleagues from both of those regulatory authorities. Apart from supporting each other at these sort of conferences, we also have regular meetings where we meet on a quarterly basis, and that gives us the opportunity to share intelligence that we may have received. We share our inspection plans, we share inspection reports, we talk about new initiatives which we might have, and we can benefit from training with each other as well. We also have a similar relationship between the MHRA and the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia, and we could again share inspection schedules and reports. And we have had Australian inspectors who have come out. Well, they've joined online remotely through some of our inspections, and we've shared best practices. And then through the Northern Ireland protocol, we have a relationship with the European Medicines Agency, and we share our inspection schedules, and we share inspection reports, and that goes both ways. So just wanted to take a minute to discuss why these interactions are so important and why these collaborations bring benefits. Obviously, we communicate significant inspection findings. That means that we can ensure patient safety. We can make sure that any intelligence that is coming through, we discuss with each other and the best ways to move forwards. And we use that intelligence within our own systems to decide who to go and inspect or when we need to take action and when we don't. But one of the other things I wanted to allude to is, but one of our aims is also to reduce the burden that is on market authorization holders. And an example of this was an inspection that the MHRA conducted, and where we found a large number of adverse events that had not been reported into the safety database, and they were residing outside of the safety database. The company had been inundated with a large number of reports in a short amount of time and were struggling to process them. So we issued a critical finding at that time, but rather than just dealing with that ourselves, we communicated that with our partners where we had the bilateral agreements, and we were able to come to a decision together about how best to go forwards with that. And rather than everybody rushing to inspect the company, we all collaborated on what kind of corrective and preventative actions we would like to see. And then that was collated together, and we were able to put one group of those to the company to reduce the burden on them to fix that. And then when it came to re-inspection, rather than all of the regulatory agencies going and conducting their own inspection, the European Medicines Agency led on that re-inspection, and us as the MHRA went as observers. And then we were able to have that assurance that remediation activities had happened without putting extra burden on having double inspection within a short time frame. So just to finish today, I just wanted to concentrate on some of the training initiatives that we have. So I said earlier at the start that pharmacovigilance is a global activity, but it's actually becoming more global. There are more and more regulators who are starting to introduce pharmacovigilance legislation, and because of that, they are starting to introduce more and more inspectors who are looking to make sure that those regulations are complied with. So at the MHRA, we think it's very important that we are involved in that training, and we have a lot of experience in inspecting pharmacovigilance, so we try to aid those trainings where we can. And we have sent our inspectors over to China and trained inspectors from the China National Medical Products Administration, and we gave extensive training on a suite of different presentations to them. More recently, we have had the Ghana Food and Drugs Authority come over to the MHRA. We have safety and surveillance colleagues who look at the adverse event reporting, who have gone over to Ghana to help them implement their systems. And then they've come over to us, and we've helped to train their inspectors from everything from who we go to inspect and when, how we're deciding on that criteria, to what we look at when we're on inspection and how we report those inspections. And we are committed members at the MHRA to the African Union Smart Surveillance Programme, and this is part of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this is training that is provided to African nations to support their pharmacovigilance safety systems. Our safety and surveillance colleagues have been part of this for a while now, and it's something that we are starting to develop within the inspectorate as well, and we are very keen to support this. So hopefully that has given you a good insight into some of the initiatives we have. So there are a number of international collaborations ongoing. We do already share a lot of information with each other on Intel. We don't just keep that to ourselves. One of the aims is to reduce that burden on industry. We are trying to do that, but we do recognise that there are continued efforts required in this area, and it's something that we can keep continuing to push to see how we can collaborate a bit better, how we can use the information that we've got in newer ways, and continue those efforts. So I'm going to pass on to Sherry Booz now, who's going to talk you through the PIC scheme. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Bose, and I'm the Director for the Division of Enforcement and Post-Marketing Safety in CDER's Office of Compliance in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I'm really excited to speak to you all today about the newly formed PIC's Good Pharmacovigilance Practices Expert Circle. I'll start by giving you a brief history of the PIC's GPV. We'll review the organizational structure of the Expert Circle, the goals of the Expert Circle, and finally we'll review the outputs of the Expert Circle's working groups. In 2014, the PIC's working group on GCP and GPV was formed to facilitate technical cooperation and harmonization practices. This included the information sharing amongst PIC's participating authorities through the Joint Visit Program. In 2021, there was a proposal to dissolve the GCP and GPV working groups and create two separate and distinct expert circles due to their very different technical priorities. And then finally, in 2022, the PIC's committee established the GPV Expert Circle with the purpose of facilitating training and information sharing for inspectors who specialize in GPV. This is our organizational structure. I'm currently the chair of the GPV Expert Circle, and we have representatives from 16 participating authorities such as MHRA, Health Canada, and EMA, just to name a few. We kicked off our first Expert Circle meeting in February 2023 and established and received approval of our mandate by the PIC Secretariat in November of 2023. There are 3 working groups that fall under the umbrella of the Expert Circle, which include the AI Machine Learning Working Group, GPV Best Practices Working Group, and the Joint Visit Program. We'll discuss these working groups a little bit more in the next few slides. The overall goal of the GPV Expert Circle is to develop expertise by establishing a network of GPV experts, to train, design, develop, and execute a training program for GPV inspectors, to network, to develop a communication system between PIC's participating authorities, and finally to represent, to develop and maintain a common approach and interpretation of international guidelines. The outputs of the 3 working groups are summarized on this slide, and we'll go into each working group a little bit further, but the overall takeaway of the Expert Circle collectively is to establish a formal network of GPV inspectors across the regulatory agencies with the goals of information sharing and harmonization. The AI Machine Learning Working Group's main focus is to design, develop, and execute the Expert Circle meeting to provide training for GPV inspectors to obtain the required knowledge and competence to inspect key topics in a harmonized manner. The GPV Best Practices Working Group's goal is to design and develop documents for publication on the PIC's website and PIC's Inspectorate Academy. This again helps train GPV inspectors in a harmonized manner, as well as being an excellent resource for PIC's participating authorities who are still developing their inspectional programs. And then finally, the Joint Visit Program. This has been a great success in the past, with 32 GCP-GPV groups formed in 2017-2018. It was on hold during the pandemic due to travel restrictions, but the triplicate groups were able to complete the programs remotely as appropriate. The JVP is a great opportunity to learn from each other and harmonize inspectional procedures and techniques across the different regulators by observing inspections in real time. There will be a new call for regulatory volunteers under the new GPV Expert Circle, with opportunity for face-to-face and or remote options due to travel restrictions some countries may still have. In summary, the new GPV Expert Circle was formed with the goals to develop expertise, train, network, and represent. Working groups are formed to establish a network of GPV inspectors across the regulatory authorities, and this will provide an opportunity to compare and harmonize inspectional procedures and techniques across the different regulators. We at FDA are honored to have been chosen to lead this very important effort on behalf of PICS, and we look forward to the success of the newly formed GPV Expert Circle. Thank you.
So, bonjour à tous. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Baillargeon. I'm the GVP inspector with Health Canada. I'd like to thank the FDA for giving me the chance to come and present Health Canada's perspective on joint GVP experiences. So today I'll be discussing about two different action items that were taken. So as mentioned by Sherry, the Joint Visits Program, the PICS Joint Visit Program, as well as Health Canada's joint inspection with the EMA during COVID-19 pandemic. We will review the lessons learned throughout, and as well as summary of these projects. So the first project was the joint visits with the PICS. The objectives were quite clear, so provide training for all the inspectors, harmonization of the different inspections, as well as maintain mutual confidence. To do so, the inspections were carried out by the 3 different health authorities throughout a 24-month period, one in each participating country. We say visit because the host health authority is observing the other members during one of their regular GVP inspection. So this all started in 2018, with the first one being in December 2018, by the MHRA. The next one was in May 2019 with the FDA. And as we know, because of the COVID, the March 2021 was a virtual one, but it still happened during that time. So if we look at what was assessed at the process level, so these visits enabled inspectors to go through each of these areas that are discussed on my slide. So every inspector was able to provide his own health authority structure, regulations and guidance documents that are associated with the GVP program. Each health authority was able to provide the site and product selection process of how they choose. And as well, they were able to go through the inspection process themselves. So just the scope of the inspection, how does the inspectors have pre-inspection activities, the report issuance, CAPA plan assessment, as well as the tool used by the inspectors. A report was presented to the PICS to discuss all aspects of this project. As you may know, as we touched base upon earlier, everyone remembers the COVID-19 pandemic. Health authorities needed to get creative, leverage opportunity, and work jointly with trusted regulators in order to move forward in these periods of lockdown and travel restrictions. So this brings us to our second project, where Health Canada was able to conduct its first joint GVP inspection with the European Medicines Agency. Just to give you some background information, in May 2021, Health Canada contacted an MAH to schedule a GVP inspection just before the start of the summer session. Unfortunately, the MAH informed us that the EMA was also coming just before us. So Health Canada actively engaged the EMA to suggest a partnership for the inspection to see if resources could be joined and efficiencies could be gained for both agencies. Fortunately, there was a positive response for the EMA. Therefore, right away, we installed a pre-inspection meeting so that all inspectors involved in the inspection could provide a game plan. So what we did is we sent the notification to the MAH explaining that both EMA and Health Canada would be coming at the same time. EMA had already provided pre-inspection requests, and they covered most of Health Canada's pre-inspection requests as well. We did provide specific Canadian requests, but those were added to the originally added one. Since the inspection was already initiated by the EMA, it was decided that the EMA would lead the specific sessions and discussions. Health Canada would be present and could ask any questions as well as they wanted. Health Canada also led a couple of sessions that were for specific Canadian topics on pharmacovigilance. The MAH was to receive 2 inspection reports, so one from EMA and one from Health Canada, if any observations were made. The inspection was held virtually, so 10 days virtual. So the EMA shared their video conferencing services as well as their SharePoint access to all the inspectors and the MAH. Regarding time zone differences, all inspections started early in the morning, so around 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And during those sessions, there were predetermined sessions for each of the GVP topic. And during those sessions, verbal requests were made, but also in order to provide efficiency, they were also made in a written format, in the SharePoint service, so that easily the MAH and the inspectors could go back to them and see the responses there. There were some internet issues, but they were very sporadic, so no issues there. We did have daily briefings, so in the morning we would have the discussion for any outstanding issues, and one after the inspection day where we would discuss the possible observation and discussions on the next day topics. Both health authorities provided observation report to the MAH according to their own inspection process. So what happens here for Health Canada is we have an exit meeting at the end. It's where we present the draft exit notice report. This is a possibility for the MAH to clarify any points that they see in the observation. Unfortunately, EMA was not part of that exit meeting. So once the MAH provided a response to those reports, the CAPA was reviewed by both health authorities and discussed amongst ourselves. For the MAH, it was mostly a copy-paste, so there was no really added extra work to provide responses to both of the reports, so that's time there gained for them. As well, Health Canada provided a closeout letter, which was sent when the CAPA plan was deemed acceptable. So Health Canada's lessons learned. So for both the joint visits and the joint inspection itself, we saw that the PV requirements are similar across jurisdictions, and their assessment can be divided amongst regulators. I like the divide and conquer phase. So we saw that for the three parts there, the case reception, case processing, annual summary reports, as well as review of IT systems used in PV. These were quite similar across the different regulations, so they could be combined within the same sessions. Whereas the PSMF file and QPPV portion were more of an EMA portion, but Health Canada did attend those sessions in order to familiarize ourselves with this process. The last 2 points are Canadian-specific requirements, so the unusual failure and efficacy and the notification of foreign action. Again, these were led by Health Canada, but all the different participants were there for familiarization. So if we look again at the advantages, so as we discussed throughout the day, confidence and collaboration is increased between health authorities. Resources can be shared between health authorities, a reduction in travel costs as well for virtual inspection. It is a more efficient inspection process for the MAH. They do have only 10 days of virtual instead of having 20 days total with 2 different health authorities. We did encounter some technical constraints though. As I mentioned, the internet connection can be difficult for multiple participants from around the world. As well, document sharing application can be tricky, especially when MAHs are sharing confidential documents. So it's important for regulators to provide them with a safe space so that they can share those documents. Virtual inspections take more time though for health authorities. We have to schedule sessions via video conference for specific topics. Outside of those, it's difficult to interact with the MAH to get responses to small interrogations. As well, when you're on site, it is possible to get quick ad hoc sessions to resolve questions directly. The time zone difference can cause delays sometimes. It can start very early or very late for some of the MAHs. And what the inspectors missed the most during the virtual session was the interaction face-to-face. It's very difficult to see the body language of the person that you're interviewing. So that was missed during the inspection. So to recap our takeaways from these, the joint visits and the inspection. So joint inspection are not only possible, but successful. Technologies as basic as video conference and SharePoint were very useful tools for inspections teams so far apart. All the MAH's PV systems were reviewed by multiple inspector eyes, inspector with different expertise. Health Canada would not have been able to cover so much in the same amount of time. Increasing collaboration and moving towards inspection reliance is also a point that's needed to be considered here. Regarding time, it does not require more time for both agencies besides the pre-inspection meetings that we had, and it will enable all to perform the inspection within the allocated period like we requested. MAH will have 2 agencies at the same time, but to go over the same PV system. SMEs are less solicited and free to perform their regular tasks. A cost savings for sure, like I mentioned, so virtual inspection can be done at home/office for the inspectors. It is important though that we identify leaders, like I mentioned earlier, for the different sessions. It will provide a better preparation for each of the inspectors, more time, and then we can focus on one subject instead of multiple at a time. Remote inspections process is promising by allowing remote interviews with subject and matter experts from various locations, software demonstrations, remote navigation, or review of MAH's documents. And like we mentioned, there is a possibility of a hybrid. Again, the invaluable opportunity for inspectors to share best inspection practices were a great training experience for inspectors from all agencies present. The invaluable opportunity to discuss practices and differences in regulatory frameworks, inspection processes, and compliance activities related to PV. Health Canada continued its program review by initiating the review of GVP guidance documents and increasing inspector training opportunities. As well, the last point, so globalization helps align international GV expectations. There are differences in the health authorities' PV regulations versus Health Canada's PV regulations, but still enabling joint inspections. Most companies have global activities requiring multiple input from various sites. Therefore, remote inspections may provide regulators a new way to conduct or collaborate on international inspections. So thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you, Paul and Claire and Sherry, for that great session about international collaboration. And I'm sure we'll be talking more and working together more in the future. So Now I'll invite up the session 5 presenters. We're now going to focus more on what FDA is doing now and looking towards the future. Our first presenters are Peter Dyack and Jenna Stowe, and they're going to be discussing a pilot project that our office performed last year in an effort to explore uses for remote regulatory assessments in the post-marketing safety compliance programs, PAID and REMS. And then next we are pleased to have Chrissy Cochran, the Director of FDA's Office of Bioresearch Monitoring Operations, talk to us about OBIMO inspections now and some plans for the future. And then finally, we're going to have Robert Ball. He's pre-recorded a presentation on a very hot topic among regulators and industry. It's the use of artificial intelligence in pharmacovigilance. So Jenna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you everyone for being present to hear more about how FDA is focusing on innovations and continuously looking for opportunities to improve and streamline processes as we prioritize the modernization of our operations. So regarding the future of inspections, I will be further discussing the use of the remote regulatory assessment known as an RRA. And I believe everyone should be familiar with this at this point. You heard about it yesterday and earlier today. So this segment of the session will focus on RRAs for post-marketing safety programs. And the post-marketing safety programs I'm going to reference are the PAID compliance program. And for those who are not familiar with PAID, that stands for Post-Marketing Adverse Drug Experience. And REMS stands for Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies. The latter part of this discussion will highlight elements of an RRA pilot project conducted by CDER's Office of Compliance, Office of Scientific Investigations, to monitor industry compliance and inform risk-based planning conducting RRAs in advance of planned PAID and REMS inspections. So let's start with a high-level overview of the PAID compliance program. To provide context, we follow a compliance program that provides information for conducting PAID inspections in order to monitor industry compliance and ensure FDA gets timely, accurate, and complete post-marketing safety information that we need to effectively monitor product safety profiles. So each fiscal year, we use a site selection tool to identify inspection candidates. The majority of our inspections are domestic. However, we do issue a small number of foreign inspections each year, with the total number of assignments varying based on available resources. And although we have the option to conduct for-cause inspections, the majority of PAID inspections are routine surveillance and generally not deemed to be mission critical. When we find firms aren't compliant, we try to work with them to bring them into compliance, and we can take actions like issuing warning or entitled letters if necessary. So in 2019, a public website was created for the PAID compliance program in order to provide a consistent source of information to industry and the public. You can access the link to this website at your convenience using the slides that were provided. Now I'm going to discuss the scope of the PAID compliance program. The PAID compliance program is informative when considering the characteristics that may make remote assessments a valuable tool for us. We inspect entities required to report post-marketing safety information to FDA. This includes application holders, as well as non-applicants named on labels such as manufacturers, packers, distributors, or retailers. We cover products approved under an NDA, which stands for New Drug Application, ANDAs, which are abbreviated New Drug Applications, or BLAs, which are Biologics License Applications, as well as marketed unapproved prescription drugs and over-the-counter monograph drugs. Paid inspections usually occur at a firm's corporate office or that of a business partner. For foreign firms, the site may be their U.S. regulatory agent who acts as a liaison between FDA and the foreign firm. Once we identify the inspection site, our team issues firm-specific assignment memos to ORA. Then ORA assigns a BIMO investigator who conducts the inspection and communicates with our team as needed for support. During the inspection, investigators assess the firm's pharmacovigilance activities using a combination of interviews, document review, and demonstrations. Because of this, the content they review during paid inspections may lend itself to remote assessments. For example, investigators verify if the post-marketing safety information already submitted to FDA is timely, accurate, and complete by reviewing submissions along with source documents. In addition to past performance, investigators also look at written procedures and current processes to understand how the firm conducts their pharmacovigilance activities. For example, they may do a live walkthrough of the safety database and other electronic systems to evaluate impact on data integrity. Overall, the type of information evaluated in a paid inspection is largely focused on a review of documents as well as the evaluation of processes, procedures, technology, and systems in place to understand how the firm has performed in the past and how it may perform in the future. Now I'm going to discuss the REMS compliance program. FDA conducts inspections to evaluate compliance with REMS. And again, REMS stands for Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies. So we do this to ensure the drug's health benefits outweigh the risk for patients. And note, not all drugs approved by FDA require a REMS, and all REMS are unique. Inspections are prioritized using a risk-based approach with a site selection priority list, and then regulatory actions may be taken if issues found during inspection are not promptly and adequately corrected. Some examples of REMS inspection classifications are no action indicated or voluntary action indicated. And also a note is REMS are enforceable, and some of the possible regulatory actions could be an untitled letter, a warning letter, seizure of the drug, or an injunction. And like with the paid compliance program, you can also find further information on our REMS compliance program website, and that is also linked in the slides that you have access to. And I just quickly want to mention some of the components of a REMS. It is important to remember that all REMS must include a timetable for submission of assessments. Another component could be a medication guide or patient package insert, communication plan for healthcare providers. REMS also come with a TASU, and a TASU stands for Elements to Assured Safe Use, which are required medical interventions or other actions by healthcare professionals prior to prescribing, dispensing the drug to the patient. Another component can be an implementation system and or packaging and safe disposal technologies. Next, I'm going to discuss why paid and REMS are amenable to RRAs. And again, that's remote regulatory assessment. That's a tool you've already heard about, so hopefully this will all come together. If we think back to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on resources and safety, you'll understand why ORA had the opportunity to conduct some of the assignments as RRAs. Multiple factors impacted this decision, including whether or not the inspection was mission critical, if there were travel restrictions in place, and the firm's willingness and ability to participate in the RRA. Also, as you may recall, when COVID-19 was declared a public health emergency in 2020, FDA postponed most foreign and domestic routine surveillance inspections. And as I previously mentioned, most paid and REMS inspections are routine surveillance, so they were put on hold. Now let's fast forward to May of 2020. FDA issued a press release informing the public that we may plan to use alternate tools and approaches while routine inspections are postponed. RRAs are an example of an alternate tool that we used. So eventually FDA resumed conducting prioritized domestic on-site inspections using a risk assessment system. And we started seeing a mix of both RRAs and on-site inspections for both programs. And then let's fast forward to summer of 2022. FDA issued a draft guidance for industry that described expanding the use of RRAs beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. It also highlighted the value in the use of remote assessments and opportunity to incorporate them as an additional tool to meet our regulatory mission independent of inspections. The RRA draft guidance describes possible benefits for using RRAs. At a high level, the hope is that it gives us another tool for oversight and allows us to remotely evaluate compliance to advance our public health mission. At a practical level, RRAs may be an effective tool for gaining an overall understanding of the inspected entity, allowing for a more strategic and efficient on-site inspection later. Additionally, just engaging in the RRA may help us identify issues that lead firms to promptly make corrective actions, which we could also look at during a future inspection. In the future, even though RRAs are not a replacement for inspections, they could help us accomplish more work with the potential to reach a wider range of entities, especially those that are lower risk and may not rise to the level of requiring an inspection. The wider reach also ties in with the ability to use our resources more strategically and maintain flexibility when our resources are constrained. Utilizing RRAs may also provide us agility so we can assess specific issues in a timely manner. So after hearing that discussion, I'm hoping you have at least a basic or better understanding of the paid compliance program and the REMS compliance program and how RRAs can be used as a tool. As I had mentioned, we are determined to be innovative and forward-thinking. So we launched a pilot project to further assess the value of RRAs, and now I invite my colleague, Captain Peter Dyack, to further discuss RRAs, the pilot project, and future considerations.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you everyone for being here. We're going to collaborate on this presentation. So I'm the branch chief for the post-marketing safety branch, and on my branch we have the paid compliance program as well as the REMS compliance program and the post-marketing requirement team. So as you can imagine, during the pandemic, we had a lot of our work put on hold, put on the back burner. So we decided we're going to pivot, and we're looking at these remote regulatory assessments, and we started a pilot where we would take this on in our branch, PSB, and conduct the remote regulatory assessment in advance of an on-site inspection that ORA would be conducted. Over the next several slides, I'll go more over RRAs. I know you've heard a lot about these RRAs already, but these slides will go much more in depth on what we did, what an RRA is, and how it differs from an on-site inspection, and where we see the future of RRAs going. All right. So to start with, we may be able to get a sense of the inspected entity's business operations through conducting these RAs through interviews, reviewing organizational charts, written procedures, contracts, and other documents related to how the entity functions. Next, based on document review, we may be able to verify data that is provided in a regulatory submission. For example, we can compare line listings to summary tables and source documents to submissions. A combination of interviews, document review, screen sharing may also help us assess how the inspected entity handles adverse events. We may gain insight into personnel and staffing decisions, including their qualifications and ability to perform the assigned tasks by reviewing job descriptions, resumes, and training documents. Although challenging as conducting these RAs, we may be able to evaluate certain aspects of data integrity through interviews, screen sharing, reviewing documents like data management plans and audit trails. This goes beyond just data submitted and looks at processes and systems supporting it. Additionally, we may be able to assess activities related to the database, such as validation, reconciliation, and transitions. We may also collect documents supporting communications related to PV activities, and inspected entities should also be documenting compliance activities. So they should be reviewing records related to compliance metrics, performance indicators, deviations, and CAPA management. These would all be informative. And finally, conducting interviews and requesting demonstrations of how their electronic systems actually function can provide insight into how information is managed, how various systems communicate, how records are retained, and other practical uses of this technology. Other content and situations may also be good candidates for remote assessments, but we have to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis to determine if it's an acceptable alternative to an inspection. RAs are conducted following the same compliance programs as inspections, and Jen already mentioned those compliance programs, and you can access those on our public website. The pilot project that we started in PSB, this is in advance of an on-site inspection. The purpose of the pilot is to strengthen our ability to monitor industry compliance and inform risk-based inspection planning. We did this by exploring the benefits, limitations, and utility of conducting RAs in advance of planned paid and REMS inspections. We've heard feedback from our ORA colleagues that these programs can be very document heavy. And in fact, the first few days of inspections are spent requesting and waiting for firms to provide documents and records. As part of the pilot, we wanted to see if obtaining and evaluating these documents through an RA would help focus and streamline that on-site inspection that would happen after our RA. Throughout the process, we plan to collect metrics and feedback to help in evaluating the pilot. Specifically, we're interested in how long the RRA takes to conduct and if it's better able to focus and save time during the on-site inspection. We also want to see if we're able to identify areas of concerns, and if in the future this information would help us in using our inspection resources more strategically. As part of the pilot, we also plan to send voluntary surveys to the reviewer, the ORA investigator, and the firm to collect feedback on their experience. Based on these results, we'll determine how we can best use RAs moving forward. The RA, although not a replacement for inspections, we're still being able to use the RAs to assess paid compliance during and beyond the pandemic. It's hard to draw conclusions at this point with this relatively small data set. However, we have noticed subjectively the findings from our RAs so far were consistent with observations made during on-site inspections. The RAs identified issues related to past performance, like failing to submit required reports to FDA, submitting late or incomplete safety information to FDA, failing to identify and process adverse events, and failing to maintain records. The RAs also identified issues related to firm process and impact of future performances, like having inadequate written procedures, having gaps in safety agreement with business partners, not using validated computer systems, and having employees that weren't adequately trained. The depth of what was covered in the RAs varied, but regardless, they were helpful in us understanding the firm's pharmacovigilance processes and potential compliance issues, as well as giving us information that can be used in future risk assessments and inspections. Remote assessments rely heavily on technology, and some of these issues we've seen have had an impact on our ability to effectively conduct them. These things have already been mentioned, but having unstable internet connection, poor audio quality, also sometimes the content, being able to see entities' screen is difficult during technology problems. However, also when we're sharing screens, it can be hard to read the screens. And in order to understand certain processes or verified data, we may need the inspected entity to transfer a lot of information, which can be challenging based on the technology problems that we've encountered. Finally, for all the issues and challenges I've mentioned, not every inspected entity has access to live tech support during these RAs, which further complicates and can cause delays. And from ORA's perspective, they also need framework training and support to use these technologies. However, we have been gaining more experience from conducting these RAs and remote assessments. So hopefully, some of the challenges with technology, conduct, and documents may get addressed as we explore the additional ways and as this program evolves. A lot of pushing, sorry. All right, so the RA, despite the current challenges that we have, remote assessments still provide additional tools for a subset of inspections that help us assess compliance. It could also be an effective tool for gaining an overall understanding of the inspected entity, allowing for a more efficient on-site inspection. Currently, remote assessments aren't a replacement for inspections, but they do help us accomplish more work with the potential to reach a wider range of entities, especially those that are either lower risk and may not rise to a level of requiring an on-site inspection, or sites that are in locations that pose safety risks for the investigators and we can't get there. The wider reach also ties in with the ability to use our resources more strategically and maintain flexibility when our resources are constrained. They could also be a convenient tool to do a focused look at a specific issue, like verifying source data for a particular submission. In a direct sense, it may reduce expenses for both FDA and the inspected entity. But even more, it may provide a pathway to get timely information that we need to make regulatory decisions, support enforcement actions, and inform or preclude the need for an on-site inspection. Collaborations with our foreign counterparts also ties in nicely with the strategic use of these resources. Remote assessments open the door for coordinating joint compliance assessments where there is regulatory overlap. This could be beneficial for both agencies as well as the inspected entity, as it decreases duplicative efforts. It also provides additional opportunity to strengthen the collaboration and understanding of each other's programs. And finally, remote assessments may also be a useful aid in training. With the ability to see and review documents outside of a high-pressure on-site inspection, and with more opportunity to ask questions and discuss the document internally, overall it could be a valuable training tool, and exploring additional remote assessments would be helpful in the training of new investigators. This slide's a list of available resources that are available online. And this is some closing thoughts. If you hadn't listened to the rest of the conversation, this is basically a summary that we're looking to strengthen and streamline our ability to monitor industry compliance and inform risk-based inspection planning. And we're hoping that these RRAs will help us do that. We're going to continue to evaluate our use of the RRAs, the benefits, limitations, and the utility of them, and as a compliance tool in advance of planning paid and REMS surveillance inspections. If you have any questions, we are always open. You can send your questions to our paid compliance inbox and our REMS compliance inbox. These are available in the slides. And I'd like to take a moment to thank all the people on this slide who have participated in the pilot, the RRA pilot, as well as helped in preparing these slides. Thank you. And I think next up is Chrissy, who will be talking from ORA. Thank you.
Did that wake people up? All right. It's the middle of the afternoon on day 3 of the symposium, so if you've been with us for a while, you might be getting a little tired. Please feel free, if you need to, get up and stretch. I'll try to keep you awake as much as I can. For those of you who are watching online, welcome. We're glad you're here. And let's talk a little bit more about pharmacovigilance inspections. So today, one of the things I'm going to start with is talking a little bit about an overview of the FDA BIMO program. And so why am I doing this? I get asked these questions a lot. And so I think this is a really great forum to be able to talk about how we, within the Office of Regulatory Affairs, work very closely with our regulatory counterparts in CEDAR, and how we work and do the work that we do. We're also going to talk a little bit about the application holder responsibilities. I'm going to focus in here on a couple of really key items that are then going to lead into a little bit of a discussion about the future of inspections for pharmacovigilance. And so really, I want to make sure that those points are the ones that are brought home. So hopefully you'll listen to that part of the presentation. All right, so we're going to start just briefly with our overview. So for folks who are not aware, FDA is run by a commissioner who is a political appointee. He is appointed by the President of the United States and then confirmed by the Senate. So as you can imagine, every time we have an election year, we have a potential for a new leader at ORA. But he's really our guiding light. Right now, we have Dr. Califf. This is actually his second time leading the agency. And underneath his office and all of the things that they do, we have our 6 product centers who review all of the applications that come in. So we look at all commodities at the FDA. Our name may be food and drug, but we also look at tobacco products, we look at medical devices, and biologics, veterinary products, et cetera. So we cover a broad range of topics and a broad range of products. And supporting all of those centers is the Office of Regulatory Affairs. And we do this through inspections, investigations, import operations, making sure that products that are coming into our country here in the United States are safe, and those that are on the market are remain safe and effective. So just a little bit about the organization of ORA. We are led by an Associate Commissioner for Regulatory Affairs. That is currently Mr. Michael Rogers. And you can kind of see down below what some of the things that we do. So we do have a large group that deals with import operations. So looking at all of the food, medical device components, drugs, drug components, all those things that come into our country. We also have over on the right side our Assistant Commissioner for Criminal Investigations, or OCI. You do not want them showing up at your door. Those are the folks who are going to show up with an inspection warrant. They're going to come with a warrant from a judge and a gun. So I don't want them showing up at my door, but I will tell you when I'm in a meeting and OCI is in the building, I feel safe. Because they are law enforcement, they're always carrying guns, and so I pick them out and I'm like, okay, if something happens, I'm standing behind him. We also have a large animal and human food inspectorate as well, and then we have our medical products and tobacco operations. So our investigators within the Office of Regulatory Affairs are really organized by commodity. So we have folks who do just animal food and human food inspections. But then under the medical products, we have a group that deals just with manufacturing inspections for drug products, for APIs. So that would be our OPQO, our Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Operations. For example, we also have our Office of Medical Device and Radiological Health Operations that would do inspections of manufacturing facilities for medical device products. OBPO, our Office of Biological Product Operations. So they're going to do inspections of, for example, vaccine facilities or blood banks or plasma centers. And then we have BIMO. So we cover everything we've talked about over the last 3 days here. On the pre-market side, we look at clinical trials, right? So we have our clinical investigators, sponsors, institutional review boards, as well as our non-clinical or GLP inspections. But then we also look at post-market as well. So our paid or pharmacovigilance, as well as REMS requirements inspections. So we have, I think, a unique look in the BIMO program where we get to kind of see everything that's coming in when it's new, right? But then we also still look at things when they're already on the market, and we're looking to make sure that they're still safe and effective. So we get to really look at the whole span of a product's life cycle, and that's really kind of fun and exciting. But in the BIMO program, we do have objectives, and you've heard these a little bit throughout the different talks that have happened over the last couple of days. And really, you know, our main core here is to protect the right, safety, and welfare of our human and animal research participants. That's really what we're interested in. We want to make sure folks who are participating are being protected. So looking at these objectives here, it might not be immediately clear that paid would fall under these objectives. But when we look at our second bullet and we want to ensure the quality, reliability, and integrity of data that's collected, we're not just talking about research data or clinical trial data. We're also talking about pharmacovigilance data. We want to make sure that the information that the agency is receiving is information that we can rely upon to make decisions. Do we need to recall a product? Do we need to put an alert out about something that might be concerning? Do we need to perhaps reach back out to a sponsor company and say, hey, you know, we're seeing this issue in the data. Can you provide us some more information? So we want to make sure that all the data we have coming in, regardless if it's pre-market or post-market, has quality, it's reliable, and we can act upon that data. And so that's kind of where we come in. So the Office of Bioresearch Monitoring Operations is responsible for these inspections. My investigators are spread across the United States. We try to keep folks local to where work is, because trying to travel across the United States can take a long time. You think about it, if I go from the top northwest corner of the United States and I want to go down to Florida in the southeast corner, I can probably get from here to London faster. Right? So the United States, we have a lot of geography to cover. And so we have about 100 investigators in my program. They are spread throughout the United States. And to try to help with the organization of work, we have split the country into two divisions. And so we have a Division 1, which is roughly the eastern third of the United States, also affectionately known as BIMO East, because when we originally put this scheme together, I kept getting 1 and 2 mixed up, because we generally read left to right in English. And then the other 2/3 of the country are Division 2 or BIMO West. And so we really use this to try to help with the organization of work and ensuring that we're able to get our work completed and in support of the centers. So in addition to that, when we hire our investigators, in the BIMO program, they're expected to be able to do inspections for every type of inspection that we do. So we don't hire specifically pharmacovigilance inspectors or specifically GLP inspectors. All of our investigators would be expected to do both types of inspections as well as the other types of inspections that we do as well. And so that's part of the reason why we've got them spread throughout the United States. Less travel, is really nice if you can do it. And so we try to get them focused in areas where we know we have work. I do want to talk a little bit about how we get that work and how does it come to us. You heard a little bit from Jenna and Peter about how they are looking at RRAs and how they're looking at some of that work, but how does that get to ORA when they want us to go out and do an inspection? So they do a lot of work behind the scenes. They are looking at our different systems that we have for pharmacovigilance and the adverse events that are coming in. They're looking at previous inspections. They're talking to their center counterparts in the review divisions or also in the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology that looks at a lot of our adverse event reports. And so they're getting this information and they're combining it together. And they're looking at, if we have any complaints or anything like that. And they're putting it into an inspection assignment. And they're writing up this memo and they're saying, hey, we want you to go and inspect this particular location. And we might have some additional questions or just follow the compliance program. And so that inspection assignment comes to us in ORA. I have a group of folks who take those, they review them, make sure they're complete. They have all the information we need to be able to conduct the inspection. And then they triage it out based on location. So based on where that firm is that we want to be inspected, it either goes to Division 1, East, Division 2, West, or to our foreign cadre, if it happens to be international. And as was mentioned, we do actually do international pharmacovigilance inspections as well. Once that's been triaged out to the division, it eventually makes its way down to an investigator is assigned. They go out, complete the inspection. Once they come back from that pharmacovigilance inspection, they're going to write their EIR, so their Establishment Inspection Report. And then they're going to take that report and they're going to send it back to CDER. And the folks in CDER and the paid group are going to take a look at that for compliance. So we have a little bit of a separation of duties here, where we're conducting the inspections and then they're reviewing and assessing for compliance. So they're taking everything we've written in that EIR, along with any exhibits we've collected, and they're looking at that information. They're looking at other information with the other groups that they work with in the center to come and make a final determination as to what the compliance outcome of that particular inspection will be. And then they will send you the regulatory correspondence and make the final classification for that inspection. So we get a lot of questions about, well, where should I send information? Who should I contact after my inspection? Well, we do ask, in trying to be very green, that you please send us your response electronically. So if you did receive inspectional observations on a Form FDA 483, we will ask that you send that to the division correspondence mailbox based on where that inspected firm was located, and we will ensure it gets to the appropriate contact within the center, as well as filed within our ORA files as well. Please keep in mind that if you do receive a Form 483, that's not a final agency determination as to the compliance status of your facility, of your site, of your firm. Okay, so as I mentioned on the previous slide, it does still need to go through a compliance review with the center and with those folks. Okay, so they will take a look at that and then they'll send you out the correspondence. If you have questions about the inspection itself, you can feel free to contact our management. Again, based on location, their email information is on the slides here. If you have a question about the regulatory correspondence or about the compliance status or the final classification of your inspection, you can contact the POC that's located on the letter that you received from the center. So how do we recruit and train our investigators? And so this is my shameless plug. We're always hiring. And this QR code, if you're more interested in finding out about what it means to be an ORA investigator, you can go to this QR code here and read all about it. And, apply if you're interested. So we hire folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, not just from a clinical background, but we look for folks who also might have pharmacovigilance experience. They might have GLP experience. We have doctors who are investigators, pharmacists, pharmacologists, nurses. It really spans the gamut. We love having a diverse group of folks because that really encourages a lot of different thinking, right? Folks bring in very different ways of thinking about things based on their background. We've got folks who are just relatively out of school, as well as folks who have been in industry for 15 or 20 years, who have come to us. I like to ask my staff, why are you here? Why are you doing this, right? Because we work for the government. We don't get paid a lot of money. You're not here to get rich if you're working for the government, right? But, I thought it was really well put. One of my investigators happens to be an anesthesiologist by training. And when I asked her that question, I said, why are you here? She said, in the operating room, I can help one person. But at FDA doing this job, I can help millions of people. I can help them. I can ensure that the products we're getting out to them are safe and effective. And to me, that's just like mind blown, right? I'm here to help people. That's why I do what I do. And I'm very passionate about what I do. And you should be too. When we bring our new folks in, they go through basic training. Every ORA investigator goes through the exact same basic training where we teach them about the law, we teach them about personal safety, and how to conduct an inspection, gather evidence, write reports, etc. After that, they go to more advanced training, and that'll be specific for their commodity area that they've been hired into. So for BIMO, we start them with our clinical course, where we talk about clinical investigator inspections, institutional review board inspections, sponsor inspections, because that's really the bread and butter of what we do. And so that's what they start with, and then they'll move on to bioequivalence training, paid and REMS training, GLP training, etc. But really, a lot of the information that we're providing them and that we're training them on is available to you as well. So I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with it already, to become familiar with the IOM, the Investigations Operations Manual. It is publicly available online on FDA's website. It is updated twice a year. And it's really kind of the general overview of everything that we do and how we do it. So how would you expect us to issue a 482 or a 483? How would you expect us to show up to your site? Really here, folks, focus on Chapter 5 is for inspections. If you do nothing else, you can read the rest of it. If you can't fall asleep at night, it'll probably help. In Chapter 5 as well, there is a subchapter 5.14 that is specific to BIMO, so take a look at that as well. And as was mentioned earlier by my colleagues here from CEDAR, we do have compliance programs. There is a compliance program specific to paid, so take a look at that as well. So paid or pharmacovigilance, depending on where you're located and what your lingo is. And between those two items, you should be really prepared for an inspection, because the compliance program is going to walk you through the types of documents, the types of information that we're going to ask for while we're on inspection. Now, when we show up at the door, don't just have like a big box with everything that's in the compliance program, that you put in the conference room and say, have at it. Just because it's in the compliance program, we may not necessarily ask for everything that's in there during the course of an inspection. We may ask for other things. The point is that we want you to be prepared with the types of information, and it should be readily accessible. You should know where it is and how to get to it quickly. Okay. So I'm going to move on a little bit. There's a couple of points I want to make in regards to application holder responsibilities, and this is specific to paid or pharmacovigilance. And so one of the things I want to talk about, and if you've been with us for the last couple of days, you may have heard folks talking about in sponsor oversight, control and oversight. And it doesn't change when you get to pharmacovigilance. You need to ensure that you have control and oversight of that data that you're reviewing, because remember, as an application holder, you're ultimately responsible for ensuring that that information is being sent to the agency in a timely manner. Application holders are required to have specific written procedures for how are you going to determine what adverse events are even out there. So what is your surveillance plan? How are you going to go about doing that? When you do find them, how are you going to receive them? How do you take them in to your office, to your program? How are you evaluating them? How do you even make that determination if it needs to be submitted to the agency or not? And if it does, how are you reporting that to FDA? And this is all very important because we have so much electronic data now that we really want to make sure that if we haven't looked back and maybe updated our processes in a while, maybe we've had some new updates to our software, we're going back and taking a look at those procedures and those processes, making sure they're current and up to date. But also making sure that we can have access, and that you have access. So remember, as an application holder, you're responsible for the information that's coming in. You should have access to what you're subcontractors are providing you or submitting to you. And as FDA investigators, we should have access as well to those systems. Because also, some folks may be aware, some may not be aware, but in the Food and Drug Omnibus Reform Act of 2022, which was in December of that year, there was a change made to regulations or to the law that says that FDA must be provided access to electronic systems. So it's really important you're keeping your data electronically, that we're able to access those systems. Now, I don't want anything other than read-only access. I only want it for the time that we're doing that particular inspection. Okay? But that can also save you some time. You know, we used to traditionally always do kind of the shoulder surfing, where you had to have somebody who was there the whole time, clicking through for us. We'd tell you what we wanted to look at, where we wanted you to look. Yeah, we're finally moving into the digital age now. We're going to start looking at those systems. So we want to make sure that, you know, we can have access to those systems as well, and Congress thought that that was important enough that they actually wrote that into the law. And so that includes not only preclinical or clinical data, but it includes post-market data as well and post-market activities. And so just making sure as an application holder that we have access to your systems, but your subcontractors are aware as well that if we come in to do an inspection at their location, that we would need access to their systems as well. I'm not talking about every system under the sun, right? I don't care about your financials. That's not what I'm here for, but just those systems where you keep that pharmacovigilance information. And, you know, and it's really important, right? We have all this information that's coming into FDA now, and it comes in so many different ways. And the majority of this really is electronic data, right? So we have patients and consumers who might be reporting adverse events voluntarily through our MedWatch program, or they might be voluntarily reporting that to the manufacturer. Hey, you know, I had this issue, I have this concern. Once that gets to that manufacturer, you know, really there's that mandatory reporting requirement to have to review that and then submit it to the FDA. And all that information ends up in our database. And the more we can do this electronically, the faster it happens and the better chance we have of making sure we're capturing things, right? We can review them fairly easily. We also want to make a point here that audit trails, please ensure audit trails are turned on. If you're an application holder and you've never looked at an audit trail, please do so. It really benefits you to look at the audit trails as well. Make sure they're in a human readable format. Because we've gotten audit trails when we've asked to look at them to see how things have been changed that really have made no sense. And it becomes harder to reconstruct what actually is occurring. So again, I did mention safety reports. They do need to be in an electronic format per the regulation. There's a link here to that. And we have 2 guidance documents out there that can help you with that as well. And so those are both linked here within the slide presentation. So please take a look at that, ensure the information is in a form that we can utilize. It does need to be in a format that FDA can process, review, and archive. And so doing that electronically really is the easiest way to do that. So you heard from my colleagues about the RRA pilot, and we're really excited about this because I think it can, have some benefits for us on the ORA side as well. And so we're going to continue that pilot throughout the rest of this year and then do some review and look at it and see, hopefully it's successful, and how we want to continue to incorporate that within our program. Again, I talked about access and inspection access, and we talk about electronic access. We do utilize box.com for a lot of our electronic document requests. We have done some on Teams as well. We know that in a lot of companies, you know, who has a CD drive anymore in their computer? I can't remember the last time I had one. I know USB drives are being locked down. So really being able to transfer files electronically through box.com is great. One point I do want to mention though, if you're sending us a response to a 43 or you're sending us some documents, please hopefully send them as a PDF. They're a lot easier for us to utilize. Please do not send us a link to a SharePoint site that you have at your facility, because we're not going to be able to access that. We won't get past our own firewalls to be able to get there. So if you can send us a PDF, preferably bookmarked, I'm going to put that plug out there. You know, with anything that you're sending us, that just makes it a lot easier for us to find the information. We end up with fewer questions down the road. And really, when we talk about inspection readiness, you know, we've heard the last several days about kind of this, there's been a little bit of a theme, right, about moving things upstream a little bit, making sure you have your risk assessment early, making sure you're doing those things. I would say that inspection readiness for your pharmacovigilance inspection starts before your first subject is enrolled in your first clinical trial. It starts with your risk assessment, with how you build your protocol, how you're gathering that data that's going to go in your label, right? Because then that's going to affect your pharmacovigilance down the road. So really being ready for that first inspection starts before you even start your first clinical trial. And it's just constantly looking at what you're doing. This is an iterative process. It's not a one and done when we first start, but anytime something changes, it's going back, taking another look at that risk assessment and making sure we have things right. So just to summarize, you know, we do work very closely with CDER. We have a lot of communication with our folks and our colleagues in the center, especially around pharmacovigilance. Just remember, application holders, you do have responsibilities for electronic submissions, and there's a lot of great information in those two guidance documents, as well as the regulations about that. And our inspections will continue to evolve. With this RRA pilot, you know, we're looking at ways to perhaps look at some information ahead of time so that, you know, we don't have to spend as long of a time on your site. And hopefully it's going to free up some time for you as well. So thank you very much. I will take any questions during the panel, and I'm going to turn it back over to Carolyn.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, Pete and Jenna. Unfortunately, Bob was not able to join us. He really wanted to be here, but he pre-recorded his presentation. So we'll turn it over to Bob, and then there will be a break afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bob Ball. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology in CDER at FDA. Thank you for inviting me to talk today about artificial intelligence and pharmacovigilance. The opinions in this lecture are mine and don't necessarily reflect the views of the FDA. My only disclosure is that I have a patent on a natural language processing algorithm. Today I'd like to talk to you about what is artificial intelligence, how might AI apply to pharmacovigilance, then a framework for readiness for thinking about AI and pharmacovigilance, some more general regulatory and consensus development activities for AI and PV, and then I'll summarize my talk. So to begin, what is AI? Artificial intelligence has been broadly defined as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. Many technologies have been placed under the AI umbrella, Machine learning and natural language processing are the two that have been most commonly applied to pharmacovigilance. Machine learning is defined as a technique that can be used to design and train software algorithms to learn from and act on data. And NLP is the application of computational techniques to the analysis and synthesis of natural language and speech. To take a little bit of a deeper dive into these definitions, classical machine learning is divided into two types, supervised and unsupervised. The biggest difference between the two is that supervised machine learning requires a human annotated data set that the algorithms train on. Unsupervised algorithms generally just look to cluster data in interesting ways and based on statistical principles. Deep learning is a type of machine learning that is based on a technique called convolutional neural networks. And this approach has revolutionized much of artificial intelligence work and is the basis for the large language models, which I'll talk to in a minute. The key, though, for convolutional neural networks and deep learning is to have large data sets. And this, of course, can be a challenge, especially in a specialized field like pharmacovigilance. On the bottom right of the screen is a Venn diagram that shows how some of these technologies can fit together. You'll see there's the broader blue, which is artificial intelligence in general. ML is machine learning. NLP is natural language processing. Deep learning is a type of ML. And where all of them intersect is where large language models happen. So what are some key concepts about large language models? So first, large language models are designed to predict the next word in a sentence. They do that by training a large convolutional neural network from a massive amount of data. This has largely been taken from the internet, but any text sources could be used. And it's very computationally intensive to do this. Sometimes these algorithms are then fine-tuned. This can be used by providing human feedback, for example, telling when the result of a query is correct or incorrect. Or it can also be used by providing a specialty data set, such as electronic healthcare data or pharmacovigilance data, to make the large language model work better on those data types. The key for interfacing with large language models is prompt engineering. It matters how you ask the questions. So subject matter experts, such as all of you in pharmacovigilance, and AI scientists can work together to design and refine prompts to get the best answers from these models. There's been an explosion of large language models, and this presents many opportunities and challenges. What this graphic illustrates is on the far left, beginning around 2009, large language models began to be introduced. And all the way through that S-shaped black line to the right, newer large language models and bigger large language models have been made available, including GPT-4, BARD, which we've heard about a lot in the past year. And a very important one for our work is the Llama model. Llama is a model that was released to the public domain by Meta, the parent of Facebook. And it's important because it's a relatively small model and can fit on single servers and can be used to process internal data without the massive computational infrastructure that's required. So there's a lot to be learned about these models and a lot of changes that are likely to be coming in the next few years. So exactly how they're going to be impacting pharmacovigilance is yet to be determined. So now shift gears a little bit to pharmacovigilance. Most of the focus in pharmacovigilance with AI has been on individual case safety reports. And why focus on them? Well, they have a long proven track record of identifying new safety issues. They'll likely remain important for the foreseeable future. There's an increasing number and variety of data sources that need to be processed. For regulators, there's a growing volume of ICSRs that need to be analyzed. You can see on the right, that's a graph showing the number of reports over the past 10 years for the FDA adverse event reporting system. And now we're receiving over 2 million reports. And we need some automation to help assist with the processing that. Also, submission of ICSRs is a global requirement. So harmonizing around the approach of applying AI is an important goal. ICSR processing has been happening for at least a couple of years, primarily by the pharmaceutical industry. This slide is taken from an article by Schmidger et al. Describing the ICSR process, which includes intake, evaluation, follow-up, and distribution. What I like about this graphic is it starts with a core of those main concepts, but then shows all the different tasks and subtasks that need to be computed to make this process work. Some examples of ICSR processing include identification of the 4 minimum elements of an ICSR, the identifiable reporter, patient, an adverse reaction, and a suspect product. Additional steps that have been computed include determination of important regulatory categories such as seriousness and expectedness. The next step in the application of AI, though, is ICSR causality assessment. As all of you know, causality assessment is determining whether a drug is likely to have caused the adverse event or not. Right now, that relies primarily on expert judgment and global introspection. You can see on the right, this graphic illustrates, in a manner analogous to the prior slide, some of the core data points that are needed: drug exposure, the adverse event or outcome, temporality between the drug exposure and the outcome, and alternative explanations, with some of the subtopics in each of those categories. But what's important to note is that the assessment of ICSRs for causality relies on information internal and external to the report. And also that exactly how safety evaluators analyze data has not been completely described. It's a complex process. It varies often by the data available. And that's necessary to really understand how best to create a computable application. Many are hopeful that large language models will provide the nuance that will allow this to come to fruition. But when thinking about whether or not an AI algorithm is ready for ICSR processing and assessment, here are some things to consider. Algorithm performance is arguably the most important, but other things such as documentation, transparency, explainability are also needed. And then quality control. Quality control is very important because at the moment, none of these algorithms are perfect. So we're going to need a human in the loop to monitor the output of these systems. But if an AI algorithm doesn't achieve this perfect performance required for full automation, the key challenge then becomes, how do you ensure quality without reducing the efficiency gain from the AI algorithm to make it, to keep it useful? So you could have 100% validation, but then that might defeat the purpose of the algorithm. So some things to think about in how one might approach such a quality system include a risk-based approach in which the effort is proportional to the implications of misclassification on the overall evaluation goals. So if the algorithm is extracting age from a piece of text, for example, that might require less validation than an algorithm that's making a determination that this drug caused this adverse event. It will also be important to incorporate the reliability of the AI algorithm's performance through carefully applied principles of algorithm development and then potentially formal competence metrics. But the selection of quality assurance techniques is still a bit of an art, and more work is needed to determine what are some of the best approaches. Some techniques include things like sampling or simultaneous independent algorithm application, or incorporating the AI algorithm into a human-led evaluation process that includes other means of quality assurance. So I'm going to shift gears now to some more general regulatory and consensus development activities for AI and PV. You're probably aware that FDA released a discussion paper last year on AI and drug development, including pharmacovigilance. The EMA also released a reflection paper on AI and the life cycle of medicines last year. The FDA EMA pharmacovigilance cluster formed a working group on AI in late last year, and Health Canada and PMDA are joining that as observers this year. There's been a CIOMS 14 working group for AI and PV ongoing for the last 2 years, and that working group is trying to develop consensus approaches to how AI might be applied to PV. There's also a pharmaceutical inspection cooperation scheme working group or expert circle focused on how to do inspections for emerging technologies like AI and ML that is forming. FDA's paper had as its goal to promote mutual learning around 3 main core issues: human-led governance, accountability and transparency, quality, reliability, and representativeness of data, model development, performance monitoring, and validation. FDA received many comments and is in the process of digesting those comments with the goal of producing a guidance document over the next year. Some of the work over at FDA includes continuing these collaborations and mutual learnings, tracking the use of AI ML in drug development, including pharmacovigilance, advancing and supporting development of demonstration projects to identify best practices, and probably most importantly, developing a risk-based framework for credibility assessment that is based on work using this approach for models in deterministic systems, such as, for example, pharmacokinetics or medical devices. So there's been a lot of unanticipated challenges with AI, and I suspect those will continue. A short while ago, the Wall Street Journal had this article about entitled, "Does Working with Robots Make Humans Slack Off?" And this is based on a long observed phenomenon in human teams where a small number of the team members do most of the work. Now, this may be something that you all have experienced yourself. And the Wall Street Journal article cited this paper on the right about a test that was run looking at how humans versus a human AI system for inspecting electronic circuit boards performed. And what they found was that the human alone did better than the human in AI. And they hypothesized that the reason was humans relied more on the AI algorithm when it was available to them. So in summary, classic AI systems are being used for ICSR processing and analysis, but uncertainty remains about the best approaches to monitoring quality. Humans in the loop will be important for the foreseeable future. LLMs are very powerful and are likely to change the landscape, but there's still a lot of uncertainty and a lot of technical and policy considerations to think about. And FDA is building a regulatory approach for AI and drug development, including pharmacovigilance based on a risk-based framework for credibility assessment. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues and thank you for letting me speak today.
Regulatory updates from FDA and MHRA. So up first is Lauren Bateman, who is a senior informatics advisor in the Office of the Commissioner at FDA, and she's going to walk us through the post-market safety reporting requirements for combination products. And then next we have Saranjan D, Deputy Director for the Regulatory Science staff at FDA, and he's going to take us through the new ICH E2B R3 guidelines for submitting ICSRs to FAERS. And finally, we're going to circle back to Claire Longman to discuss updates to pharmacovigilance requirements at MHRA. So I'll let Lauren.
All right. Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you guys for having me. So I'm going to be talking about the exciting world of combination products and the post-marketing safety reporting requirements for them. So we're just going to be covering the basis today, but with regards to combination products, I'm going to be giving an overview of the 2016 final rule for PMSR requirements for combination products, which is applicable to the combination product applicants and constituent part applicants. So first, what are combination products? Combination products are their own distinct type of medical product. They are a combination of two or more different product types. So this could be a drug and a device and a biologic, a drug and a biologic, or it could be all three. Some of the common examples are a pre-filled syringe, a drug-eluting stent, or a first aid kit that contains both devices and drugs. The drugs, devices, and biologic products that make up a combination product are called constituent parts. And each constituent part has its own mode of action. Combination products are assigned to a center who's responsible for the regulatory authorities associated with that product, and that includes post-market. And that center is called the lead center. The lead center is determined based on what's called the primary mode of action, or PMOA. The PMOA is the single mode of action of the combination product that provides the most important therapeutic effect to that product. So let's look at some examples. So first, we have a pre-filled vaccine syringe. So in this case, you have a vaccine, which is a biologic constituent part, and you have a syringe, which is a device constituent part. When thinking about the modes of action, you have the action of the vaccine, which is to provide protection to the patient. And then you have the action of the syringe, which is to deliver that vaccine to the patient. So in this case, the biologic or the vaccine is going to be the PMOA, and therefore, because the product would be regulated by, a vaccine would be regulated by CBER, the combination product would be assigned to CBER. A second example would be a drug auto-injector. And this is going to be really similar to the example we just talked about. You have the drug and you have the delivery device. The action of the drug is going to be the PMOA. And so if that drug were to be regulated by CDER, the combination product would be assigned to CDER. And then my third example is a drug-eluting stent. In this case, you have a stent or a device constituent part, and its mode of action is to hold open an artery. And that stent may have a drug coating on it. And that coating may be an anticoagulant to prevent blood clots. And so in this case, the action of the device, which holding open the artery, is going to be the primary mode of action. And so this combination product would be assigned to CDRH. There's three types of combination products. Now, those products I was just mentioning on the last slide are called single entity combination products. They're physically or chemically combined. Think of them very hard to separate. But another type of combination product is called co-packaged. So an example of this would be if you have an empty syringe that is packaged together with a vial of a drug. Another example would be a first aid kit that contains individual drugs and individual devices. And the last type of combination product are called cross-labeled. They're less common, and these are when they're individual products that are packaged separately, but they are labeled and intended to be used specifically with one another in order to achieve their intended therapeutic effect. An example of this would be a light-emitting device that is intended to be used with a specific light-activated drug. So now let's talk about post-marketing safety reporting requirements for combination products. In general, when thinking about the PMSR requirements for a combination product, the requirements are going to come down to whether you are a combination product applicant or a constituent part type applicant. And I'm going to explain the difference between those. So first, and most commonly, you have a combination product applicant. These are going to be applicants who have the only or all applications for the combination product. So those single entity examples I mentioned, like a prefilled syringe, if you have that product, you're going to be a combination product applicant. And as a combination product applicant, you have responsibilities for application type-based reporting requirements and constituent part-based reporting requirements. And we'll talk about those in a moment. But first, the second type of applicant are constituent part applicants. These are most commonly going to be in the situations of cross-labeled combination products. So this is when you have one application for one constituent part of the combination product, and there's a second applicant with a second application for the other constituent part of the combination product. Constituent part applicants are only responsible for the application type-based reporting requirements. So let's talk about what those requirements are. So application-based reporting requirements, which is along the top row here or orange on my slide, those are going to be your typical requirements based on the application type that the combination product received marketing authorization under. They're not listed on this slide because applicants should typically know what they are, but they are outlined in 21 CFR 314 for NDAs and ANDAs, 21 CFR 600 and 606 for BLAs, and 21 CFR 803 and 806 for devices. Now, moving along to constituent part-based reporting requirements. This is based on the constituent parts that make up your combination product. So thinking about the first column here, if you have an NDA and that NDA includes a device constituent part, you have additional reporting requirements on top of those that come along with the application type. In this case, you would be responsible for 5-day remedial action reports, malfunction reports, and correction or removal reports and records. And while I don't have time today to dive deeply into what each of those are, I do have a resource slide to help point you to where to go to so you can learn more information about them. But I do want to go through an example. So let's say you're a combination product applicant and you have a product that is a co-packaged drug and infusion set, and it's marketed under an NDA. If you determine that a 15-day report is required after a serious, unexpected adverse event that was related to overinfusion of the drug occurred, but you then determine that the infusion set could have caused or contributed to that event, then you also are responsible for submitting a malfunction report. There may be instances when you have to submit a malfunction report and not a 15-day report. An example of that might be a co-packaged combination product in which you have a syringe that the sterile barrier was compromised. If the healthcare professional discarded that syringe before using it, there was no adverse event. However, had that malfunction occurred and the compromised sterile barrier would have been likely to cause or contribute to death or serious injury, then a malfunction report would be required. The other columns in this table are similar in format. So the middle one, if you have a BLA or a device application, and it includes a drug constituent part, then you also must submit field alert reports or FARs and 15-day reports. And last, if you have an NDA or a device application, and that includes a biological product constituent part, then you're also responsible for biologic product deviation reports or BPDRs and 15-day reports. So where should you be submitting these? So individual case safety reports, or ICSRs, is the term that's used to include 15-day reports, 5-day reports, malfunction reports, and reports of death or serious injuries. And applicants must submit ICSRs in accordance with the procedural requirements in the regulations associated with the application type of the combination product, and they should follow the policies and the procedures of the lead center. For reports other than ICSRs, so that includes FARs, BPDRs, and correctional removal reports, you would submit those reports in accordance to the procedural requirements and policies associated with the report type. A combination product applicant may submit a single report to comply with more than one reporting requirement if the reports can be submitted in the same manner and the combined report satisfies all applicable reporting requirements, including all of the submission timelines. So for example, if you are a combination product applicant with a CDER-led NDA for a drug device combination product, and you have to submit a 15-day report and a malfunction report, then that applicant can satisfy both of these reporting requirements in a single report that's submitted within 15 days, and that report would be submitted to FAERS. So PMSR reports for combination products must contain all of the information required for the report type under the applicable regulations. And this includes relevant information on the entire product, including each constituent part, regardless of whether it was implicated in the event. So if you have an event that you have to report a 15-day report, and it appears that there's no relation to the device constituent part, you should still include information about that device constituent part when reporting it to the FDA, even if it was not implicated in it. And this slide includes some of the examples of the fields in which you can include this information in each of the reporting systems. So on the left, FAERS, the drug and non-vaccine biologic adverse event reporting system, there are device constituent part fields. So you can indicate what the device brand name was, its common name, its pro code, and even more. And then on the flip side, in CDRH's EMDR system, which is for device adverse event reports, there are fields in which you can include information about the drug or biologic. So I only had time today to go over a very high level, overview of this. So I'm leaving you with many resources. And I really want to draw your attention to bullet 4, which is our guidance for industry. This is a fantastic resource. It goes into so many more details than I could cover today, but it also has a lot of really great examples to help you think through your products and how these regulations would apply to you. So what do I hope for you to take away today? First, do you have a combination product? And if you do, what are the different constituent parts and what is the lead center for that product? And then second, what are the PMSR requirements that apply to your product and where should those reports be submitted? And lastly, what constituent part information should you be including in the reports for your product? So is there a device in your combination product? Please do include information about the device. And if you still have questions, we're here to help. You can contact the Office of Combination Products at combination@fda.gov. You should also reach out to your lead center if you know them. If you don't, we will help connect you to the right people to answer your questions. Thank you for the time today. And I want to welcome my colleague Saranjan to talk more about FAERS updates.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Saranjan Dey. I'm the Deputy Director of Regulatory Science Staff in Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology in CDER in US-FDA. So today's talk will be about updates on FAERS. So what are we going to talk about? We'll recognize that FDA will require reporting of pre-market and post-market safety reports in the ICH E2B R3 format to FAERS. We communicate the implementation status, timelines, and readiness. And FAIR's case processing and analytical modules now accommodates product quality defect and complaint reports. So we have made one system for both adverse event and product quality. All right, so FDA is in the process of implementing electronic submission for both post-market and pre-market safety reports using ICH E2B-R3 standards. There'll be separate submission path and business rules for pre-market and post-market safety reports. We have all the technical specification documents that have been posted on the FAIR's electronic submission page. And all communication will be done via the FAIR's electronic submission page on fda.gov. And the link is at the bottom of the FAIR's electronic submission page. So the way we are implementing this, and partly also has been implemented, is we're going to have two separate submission paths, one for pre-market side and one for post-market side. And the reason being that we all know that post-market report eventually gets into the public dashboard, versus pre-market report will not get into the FAIR's public dashboard. So it will not be publicly published. So we have two separate paths, which means if you're submitting through the gateway, you have two separate headers. Now we also have two separate headers in the pre-market side for CEDAR and CBER. And the reason being that we did find that there are some IND numbers which overlap between the two centers. So as a result, we made sure they are separated out. And then once you separate it out in CEDAR and CBER, we also know, that it is for an IND or for a post-market, and the post-market headers are just shown on the screen here. And this is basically a very important table to keep in mind, that if you're submitting electronically using the E2B standards, then for the IND safety reports, you have the AS2 header, you have the routing ID, but within the XML, it also identifies with the N14 saying that it's a pre-market report, and N2R3 says within pre-market it's a CEDAR IND. And similarly for the other three values that you have, of which the third value is for pre-market report, but then they are the IND exam bioavailability and bioequivalence study safety reports. And finally, you have the post-market safety reports. The values of this are basically the same as we did in R2 for AS2 header and routing IDs. So now what you have is you have two options to submit these reports. As we know, post-market safety reports are mandated to be submitted electronically. So these are the two options. When it comes to pre-market report, this will be the two options. Of course, the day we publish to say that we are ready for pre-market, from that point, you'll have 2 years to comply to the submitting of electronically. So option A is database to database submission, which is again the E2B standard. The sponsors submit through the gateway, they get the first acknowledgement, FAIRS processes it, and they get a second acknowledgement which says is it successful or not successful. Option number B, where most of the companies who use option number B who have less volume reports, because you have to submit these reports one at a time, it's a web form, and you submit this report through a safety reporting portal where you have to register first, and then you submit those reports, which then gets into FAIRS. So safety reporting portal intended for sponsors, and also we have seen a lot of CROs who use that, who do not have an infrastructure for the gateway. And these are individual reports only, no batch reporting can be done. One report at a time can be used for both commercial and research INDs. And right now it's not available for vaccine reporting. If you're a CRO, you need to have separate accounts for your separate customers or license holders. Post-marketing report and pre-market report, they will be upfront. It will ask you in the safety reporting portal that are you submitting for a pre-market or a post-market. It's an online form. If you have any document where you have like a narrative written, I mean, the narrative has to go as typed in narrative in the narrative section of safety reporting portal. We have seen some companies, they would say, see attachment. Yes, you can add attachment to the safety reporting portal, but it doesn't help us with all the AI work that we are trying to do. All right, this is free of cost. And if you are only submitting using the as a post-market reporting, you really don't have to do any actions. But if you are going to be submitting pre-market report, then of course you have to register those INDs for which you're going to be submitting, so that when you go on the online form, it will automatically give you the IND numbers for which you are submitting the report for. And any questions, fairsesub@fda.hhs.gov. This is the email address where you can ask all your questions. There are some documentation which are available, which are important. So this is the technical specification document. The regional core data elements. This is, if you're submitting E2B, this is a very important document. It lists all the ICH and the regional data elements, all the attributes, the conformance, business rules, and expats and acknowledgement attributes. This is a forward compatibility rule. If you have submitting pre-market report, then you don't have to worry about this, because pre-market report comes through ECTD as PDF. So we never had E2B R2. But for post-market, yes, you need to look at this document to move from R2 to R3, especially for the, this is for the regional elements. And then finally, we have given some sample XML files, which has different variety of both post-market, pre-market, combination products. Yeah, and it gives you some sample instances to show you how the XML will look like. So going into IND safety reports, this is an important thing that FDA is working towards, and the process that we are trying to do is to get these gets a submission electronically. We know we all submit ECTD, but now that we will be submitting electronically, so through the XML or through the safety reporting portal. What types of reports for IND to be submitted? The first top three, based on 21 CFR 213, 32A, B, and C. So those are the types of reports that will be submitted through FAIRS. Remaining reports will continue to be submitted through ECTD. How will it help sponsors? So first thing, you no need to submit the 1571 or cover letter for the IND safety reports. No separate submission for cross-reported IND. The structure now accommodates the cross-reported IND, so there'll be only one report that needs to be submitted. You get immediate acknowledgement of an ICSR, and some additional benefit is you're submitting directly from your safety database, and I believe most of the companies have to submit through this regulatory affairs. If they submit through ECTD, that also is eliminated. Then you have IND exempt. So a little bit of IND exempt. We have, currently they don't have an electronic rule, so they will be submitted as 3500A MedWatch form to this email address. We also encourage that the systems also will be ready with E2B and safety reporting portal, so you can utilize that to submit. So to prepare your IT systems, you can prepare your IT systems with the E2B R2, or you can go directly to safety reporting portal where you just have to get an account. And then any questions, anything that you may have, you would ask your questions to fairesesub@fda.hhs.gov. But if you don't have an account in SRP, you will ask for an account. If you don't have an account in ESG, you will first have to get that account and do all your testing before you submit. For IND exempt, you also have to request through the NextGen portal for a pre-ANDA number, which eventually will become your ANDA. So that number is also important to identify that, say, IND exempt BAB safety report. Where are we with our plans? So we have published all the regional specs. Our tools have been enhanced. The gateways has been set up from our side. system testing has been done. We did some industry testing with getting some of those IND safety reports and the post-market safety reports, all in E2B-R3 format. And with public communication, as we move through, we have actually implemented and published to say that on January 16th, I believe, that we went live with the post-market safety report in E2B-R3 format. So that from that point, you have 2 years to move from E2B-R2 to R3. But if you are safety reporting portal, you're using safety reporting portal, you can continue to do that. And so this is what was done. So right now we have not still published anything about IND safety reports. So that's why I continued your ECTD format submission. Now, once you have created your E2B R3, and if you're using the gateway, how do you test your XML? So we have FDA also is giving a validator, and it's already published, where you can upload your file. And click on validate. It will tell you the messages, error messages that you may have. You should go back, fix them. And once you don't have any messages, that means you have fixed your systems and you are ready to submit through the gateway now. What changes you may notice once we all start submitting through the E2B-R3 format? So now you submit through ECTD, goes to the gateway, regulatory submission, database, and then finally we take that and put it into FAIRS. Moving forward, if you use the E2B XML or you use the safety reporting portal, they all will directly go into FAIRS, and none of these processes, the ones in excess, will go away. And now I'm only talking about the safety reports here. So once we start year 0, which when we go live, and then from that point you have 2 years for mandatory ICSR submission via ESG or the safety reporting portal. So here is a proposed timeline that we have. So January 2024, we did post-market, we went live. This is another thing which happened after this happened very recently, where FAIRS is now becoming a more enterprise system. It can capture now cosmetic safety reports. Excuse me. So now the voluntary period has started for E2B-R3. Sometime in March, most likely looks like it probably will be first week of April that we're anticipating the final guidance, and the FR notice will come out for IND safety reports. Which we have E2B-R3 format, and for that you will reference all the updates will be provided on the FAIRS electronic submission page. Now once that goes, then you have 2 years to start working to move through from ECTD to E2B-R3, and then once you have moved, you cannot revert back to legacy methods. And finally, probably March 2026 is when companies will now have to comply with submitting pre-market and post-market ICSIs in electronic format or through SRP. All right, so FDA's approach in harmonizing, so we have harmonized the safety and quality databases. This is a big accomplishment in FDA, and that has enhanced our review. Now 2 different offices actually see 1 report, and the follow-ups that come, they also see 1 report. And the analytics module also has been updated. So the analytics module, everybody sees the same report. And so by maintaining the integrity of new data and critical legacy determination, we have really done a good job in putting all the systems together. Some of the references, these are all the documents that we have are references. And in summary, we recognized our submitting safety reports electronically, understand the submission methods and mechanism of different types of reports. We communicated the implementation status, timelines, and readiness, and then finally acknowledge FDA's approach to harmonize safety and quality. So with that, I finish my presentation, and I would like to, and closing thoughts, soon accept pre-market safety reports electronically. And with that, I invite Claire to give her presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody again. I'm going to be taking you through some MHRA updates. So for those of you who couldn't join yesterday, Steve Vinter gave an update on the compliance team strategy. So if anybody did miss that, I encourage you to go back and have a look at that, because that was a really good presentation on some of the updates that the MHRA are making within the compliance teams and the direction that we're travelling in. But today I'm going to talk you through a bit about regulatory updates in pharmacovigilance. And in order to do that, I want to give you a bit of history in our regulation and the basis of where that's come from. So for anybody who thought they were going to have an easy last session, apologies, I'm going to bamboozle you with EU and UK legislation. Once I finish that, I'm going to move on to our inspection programme. We've had a bit of a transition in the MHRA, so I want to talk you through some of our organisational charts and just show you where we fit as a PV inspectorate. And I'll talk you through our inspection programme, and then we'll have a bit of a future look at the end to finish. So just to start with, and so we're all on the same page, I wanted to talk to you about some of the major changes to PV requirements in the EU. And the UK was part of the EU for a long time, and therefore our pharmacovigilance legislation is entrenched within EU legislation. And some of the major updates that happened the biggest one being in 2012, came to by the update of Directive 2001/83 EC. And this brought with it the implementation of the GPVP modules. So they are a suite of modules that really go into a lot of detail about how pharmacovigilance should be implemented within the EU. Another update came in 2007, and that brought with it the addition of vigilance. Now, this is a centralised repository where all ICSRs that are required to be reported in the European Union are reported to that one centralised repository rather than being individually reported to EU member states. Then in 2020, the UK voted to leave the European Union, and that transition period ended on the 31st of December 2020. So from the 1st of January 2020, the MHRA became UK standalone regulator of medicines and medicinal devices. And Great Britain, which is made up of England, Scotland and Wales, now operates a legal framework that incorporates EU legislation into the UK law. And MHRA takes the sovereign decisions for medicines authorised in respect to Great Britain. Now, what's important to understand is that the UK is made up of those countries within Great Britain plus Northern Ireland, which makes up the UK as a fourth country. And Northern Ireland and products that are authorised in Northern Ireland are still required to be under EU decisions and under PV requirements, and that's under the Northern Ireland Protocol where that's specified. And that was implemented to prevent a hard border between Northern Ireland, which is in the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, which is part of the EU. So this is where it gets a bit complicated. So I'm going to talk you through some of the ways that products are authorised within the UK. So we have, despite leaving the European Union, a number of products that are authorised in Northern Ireland are still centrally authorised by the European Union. So these are innovative products. And under Regulation 726/2004, they have to be authorised under what we call the centrally authorised procedure. Now, that means that one application is submitted within the EU, and then if that application is granted, then the authorisation immediately becomes effective throughout the European Union, and that includes Northern Ireland still under the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, we also have products that are authorised nationally by the MHRA. Some of those products are authorised in respect to Great Britain only. As I said, that's England, Wales and Scotland. All UK nationally authorised products are under the Human Medicines Regulation, and pharmacovigilance sits within Part 11 of that. Now, if they're authorised just in respect to Great Britain, they are authorised under Schedule 12A of the Human Medicines Regulation. if they are authorised in respect to Northern Ireland, so these could be products that are just authorised in Northern Ireland, but they could also be authorised UK-wide, then they are granted by the MHRA, but they would be under the Commission implementing regulation, and they are those products that aren't the innovative products. So that's very complicated, I know. I have to deal with it every day, so what was the good news is, and this is what I wanted to mention, that the Commission implementing regulation and Schedule 12A actually mirror each other. We designed, when we left the European Union, when we drafted Schedule 12A, we ensured that it mirrored the Commission implementing regulation. So although there are these differences in practical terms, the pharmacovigilance that needs to be carried out under both sets of legislation are the same. So that's the good news. So I mentioned the good pharmacovigilance practices modules earlier. As I said, these were developed in 2012 under Article 108 of the Directive 2001/83/EC, and these are stipulated within that directive, and that makes them statutory guidance, and therefore any market authorisation holder within the EU must comply with that guidance. They are a set of modules that are set up that discuss all elements of pharmacovigilance, from collection and collation of adverse events, reporting of those adverse events, through to signal detection, PSURs, the quality management systems that you need to support your pharmacovigilance system. And they not only apply to market authorisation holders, but also to each of the regulatory authorities in the European Union as well, and EU member states. So when we left the European Union, what we did was we decided that we would adopt these into our legislation. And so we are still using the good pharmacovigilance practice modules. And to depict where there are differences between what needs to happen in the UK for pharmacovigilance and in the EU, we designed the exceptions and modifications document, and that is published on our website. And it's designed to be used in conjunction with the GVP module. So you need to read the GVP modules with the exception modifications document, and that will tell you where the differences lie between what's needed for EU products and what's needed for those authorised in the UK. So that's not the end of the story, though. There are more updates to come with the introduction of the Windsor framework. And this is a new legal agreement which has been drawn up, which adjusts the operation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the aim is to address the political concerns in the UK, as there's been difficulties around the movement of goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And so where a lot of the focus on the Windsor framework is about the movement of goods and includes the labelling and packaging of medicinal products within the UK, there are some impacts also to the authorisation of medicinal products. And what the Windsor framework will mean is that the UK becomes will authorise all products within the UK. So where I was talking about there are that subset of innovative products that are authorised by the EU under the centrally authorised procedure, that will no longer happen. They will all be authorised by the MHRA, and therefore they will sit under the Human Medicines Regulation, Part 11 for pharmacovigilance, and then under Schedule 12A of the Human Medicines Regulation. So where that should make things more simple, that we are the sovereign regulator, we are authorising all products, there will still be those non-innovative products that sit outside of the Windsor framework, which although we will authorise, they will be under the Commission implementing regulation still. So unfortunately, it doesn't make things as simple as we would all like, but it is a step towards that. So that's all the complicated bit done. I can take a breath. I'm going to move on to something that's a lot more easy to explain now. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our inspection programme and where we are. So we inspect under the Human Medicines Regulation, Regulation 327. And this here explains a little bit of our corporate structure. We sit under the Healthcare and Access division and in Standards and Compliance. We have 2 compliance teams, and that contains all of our GXP inspectors. So Compliance Team 2 is our Good Manufacturing Practice Inspectors and our Good Distribution Practice Inspectors. And then we have Compliance Team 1, which is headed up by Steve Vinter, who spoke earlier, who opened the Pharmacovigilance Symposium this afternoon. And that compliance team consists of our good clinical practice inspectors, good laboratory inspectors, and then our PV inspectors as well. So we have 6 PV inspectors, or we should do when we're at full remit, and then the head of PV is Sophie Radica. So you'll notice that we have 2 vacancies at the moment, which we should be filling by mid this year. And then I sit just outside of this in the expert circle, so we have an expert for each of the GXPs as well. So moving on to our inspection program, we in the pharmacovigilance team, we operate a risk-based inspection program. That means we don't inspect on a cyclical basis. We choose who to go to and where we go, and the timeliness of how often we go by risk. So we use a number of factors. We look at things such as the product. Is it a product that's on the additional monitoring list? They're the newer innovative products that we're looking at. Is it a product that we know has associated risks with it? Does it have additional risk minimization measures, for instance? We'll look at the MAH or the applicant themselves to look at, do we have any intelligence? Is there something that's leading us to believe we should go and inspect that entity? And then we'll look at the PV system. How many products does that PV system have under it? Has there been significant changes to that PV system, any mergers or acquisitions or updates to that PV system that we know about? And then we'll use our compliance history as well. What do we know about the compliance history of that organisation? Have there been significant critical findings in the past? Have we received any intelligence from any of our international collaborative partners regarding that? And there's 4 different inspection arms which we can inspect under. So the main bulk of our inspections are conducted under our routine pharmacovigilance activities inspection arm. And this includes the main elements of pharmacovigilance. So everything from collection and collation of safety data, reporting of adverse drug reactions, signal detection, writing and authoring the submission of PBRAs and PSURs, the quality management system, and all of that comes under that bracket. We then have our routine management, risk management and safety communication inspection arm, and this is looking at all of those risk management, routine risk management that has to be mandated as part of having a license within the UK. So here I'm talking about summary of product characteristics, which is equivalent to the US PI, and the patient information leaflets in packs. And we'll look at, are those documents up to date with the latest scientific knowledge, and have they been implemented within the timelines that are required? Then we look at the additional risk minimisation measures inspection arm. These are for a subset of products where the benefit risk profile is deemed to be a little bit more unfavourable, and there needs to be some risk minimisation put in place to ensure the safety of that product. And we will conduct those on a product-specific basis. It may be that our assessors within our safety and surveillance team have asked us to conduct inspections, and they can be pre-launch inspections or post-launch, and we'll conduct a specific inspection just looking at that particular additional risk minimisation measure. And they're usually reserved for the more complex additional risk minimisation measures, such as pregnancy prevention programs, controlled access and controlled distribution. And then finally, we have our non-interventional post-authorization safety studies, and they're looking, again, they are very specific. They might be specific to a product or certain studies that we'll choose. They're usually the mandated studies, so category 1 or 2 PAS. And we come into the MAH, we'll all look at from a sponsor, from the MAH perspective, and then we'll also choose a couple of sites to go on to the investigator to have a look at how AE data is being collected. So they're a little bit of a different type of inspection, and for companies, they're a new way of being inspected by the MHRA, because it means a collaboration between not just the pharmacovigilance departments, but the clinical teams as well. And then very briefly, we're going to have a future look and look at regulatory updates. So some of these have already come into effect. So the international recognition procedure, this came into effect on the 1st of January 2024. And this is a process in which the MHRA is recognising market authorisations that have been approved in other regulators, and there's certain regulators that are on the list where this will be recognised. There's 2 ways that market authorisation applicants can put in their applications, dependent on how long that market authorisation has been approved, for instance, the type of product that it is, whether there's any additional risk minimisation measures associated with that product. And it means that it should be a swifter process for approval within the UK, and less burden on our assessors. The early access to medicine scheme, this is something that we laid a statutory instrument for this in 2022. But the reason I want to mention it today is because we're starting to implement some guidance on this, and hopefully that will be published this year. And this is where there has been identified an unmet need for a medicine that is used in a life-threatening disease, and that the company can submit an early access to medicine scheme application, and that means that the MHRA assessors will give a scientific opinion on whether that can be used in the UK, and if so, that scientific opinion will last a year. And as I said, we're implementing some guidelines which hopefully will come out to support that this year. Point of care, this is the introduction of a new innovative regulatory framework. This is looking at manufacturing techniques. So traditionally, products are manufactured in a centralised basis, but with more and more innovative medicines, this is becoming more decentralised, to the point where some medicines need to be manufactured at the point of care, at the patient bedside. And this regulatory framework will help to support those medicines, and will be an update to some of the pharmacovigilance requirements around those as well. And then lastly, the Windsor framework, this will be implemented on the 1st of January 2025. I'm not saying very much about this now, and I can hear all those QPPVs in the UK shouting at me for not saying more, but we will be saying more at our own symposium, and this is a shameless plug for that. It's on the 28th of February 2024, in a couple of weeks, in Hammersmith. So please do come along to that, or log into the webinar where you can hear more on the Windsor framework. So just to summarise very quickly, because I've gone over time, the current UK PV requirements are changing with the Windsor framework. We are getting back up to speed with the number of inspectors that we have with our inspectorate, which is great news for us, bad news for all of you, because you'll see us more regularly. We operate a risk-based inspection model, so for some of you who don't come out at the top of the inspection model, we may never come to inspect. For others of you who hit a lot of those risk criteria, we'll be seeing you more often. And look out for legislative updates. We do put those on our websites. We are going to be updating our guidance shortly to incorporate the Windsor framework. So please do look there. We also publish our inspection metrics. We have our inspectorate blog where you can find out information, and we try to keep that as up to date as possible. And one last plug. we have our symposium on the 28th of February in Hammersmith, and you can join online. So thank you very much for listening. I think we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back for the panel session. So thank you very much, everybody.
Let everybody take their seats, and I'm going to invite my session 4 presenters to the stage. Paul, Claire, and Pete is going to take the place of Sherry for us. Okay, we'll get started. So Claire, I have a question for you. So for MHRA, in your opinion, can international collaboration efforts ever lead to full reliance among regulators and negate the need for duplicate inspections? And just a part 2 to that question, will there be harmonization soon on PV regulation as there's increasing collaboration across the board?
Well, that would be utopia, wouldn't it? We'd all love that, I'm sure. And it's something that I think we would love to strive towards. I don't think it's something that we will get to in the short term, but I think what we are aiming for is to harmonise a lot more and to use each other's inspections and the intelligence that we gather to really input into each other's risk assessments and to recognise that we could all start to risk assess companies in the same way and use the same processes in order to do that. And then when we've identified issues, that we can start to recognise, is that something that we need to incorporate into our risk? You know, if we're looking at it from an MHRA perspective, US-FDA or Health Canada have been to this company, they didn't find anything that was particularly significant, therefore we can lower them down our risk assessment and use in that way. And I think the other thing that we want to aim for is to not be duplicating efforts. We want to get a lot more harmonisation on where each other are going. We know that having inspections puts a lot of burden on companies, and we want to try and reduce that. So recognising where each other are going, the types of things we're looking at, and what those outcomes are of those inspections, I think is something for the short term. And then looking to harmonise regulations, that would be wonderful in the longer term. So something to aspire to in the future.
Definitely. Thank you. So Paul, I think this is related to your presentation. Are there any opportunities to have access to collated joint inspection reports? And part 2, would the collaborative inspection outcome be available for other MAHs for learning and understanding?
Absolutely. So for now, on Health Canada's side, we can only provide what is publicly available. So there is a website in which you can scroll through the different GVP inspections that were held by Health Canada, and you will find the ones, unfortunately, you won't know exactly which one would be a joint inspection, but you could see the findings there. So for now, there's not a lot of other resources that were put in order for MAHs to have more information on that. But we do invite you to scan the Health Canada website for all those reports to see where we're going and the different MAHs that we've seen. So that's pretty much what I have for now.
Let's see. Okay, Claire, for Project Orbis, what countries are included?
So for Project Orbis, there are 8 countries included. So that is the MHRA, Health Canada, the US-FDA, Singapore, Switzerland, Australia, Brazil, and Israel. I remembered them all.
And Paul, why do virtual inspections take more time for health authorities, and can this be avoided?
So in general, it would take more time because as we are planning, and again, this is on Health Canada's side, we have to plan sessions in advance. We need to make sure that all the SMEs are present during the inspection. So it's a lot of organizing, whereas when you go directly on site, you just provide the agenda of which topics you'll be discussing, and then when you get there, it's easier to just discuss with the different SMEs present. Whereas when you're virtual and you stop the session, then if you have like smaller questions, then you need to perform another ad hoc session and then get the information that you wanted. So that's where we want to, that's what I intended of saying when it's taking more time. It's more of a generic way of building the inspection itself, whereas when you go on site, it's much easier for everyone.
Okay. I have another one for you, Paul. Can any country request training, and what is the process?
Unfortunately, there isn't any specific training done. We invite everyone to consult our guidance documents, our regulations. We invite everyone, as Claire mentioned, there is the great webinar that will be held from the MHRA, where you can get information, sessions like these where we can get training. So these are the ones that you are encouraged to go to and assist, but unfortunately we don't, at least again, as the Health Canada way, we don't have anything formal for you to apply.
And then I have one last question to kind of wrap up this discussion for session 4. Will this group do any dedicated symposia on pharmacovigilance in the future?
So I think I'll answer that one. I'd say absolutely. We definitely have plans, or that's our goal, is to continue this collaboration and continue to put on pharmacovigilance conferences like this. We want to continue to be transparent, get the word out, and hopefully everyone in the audience enjoyed the presentations and the training, and you're interested in this topic, and we can continue putting on symposiums like this.
Okay, thank you, session 4 presenters. Okay, we'll now invite session 5 presenters to come up. So that's Peter, Jenna, and Chrissy. Okay, first question. Do regulatory agencies expect evidence of corrections with their responses to inspection observations?
So I'll try to answer that. We expect, we would request a response as quickly as possible, within 15 days. If the response can show proof that the correction was made, we recommend that that's included. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it can take longer to make that correction. But our goal is to get into the company to get into voluntary compliance, and they can include that information as part of their response that we will evaluate at the center level if it's received in time.
Thanks, Pete. Chrissy, I think this is one for you. The BIMO program for sponsors and CROs was updated in September 2023. How are BIMOs conducted since the update? What is the difference in terms of the approach that FDA, investors, auditors are taking?
Yeah, thanks. So our inspections are conducted the same, even since the update to the compliance program. What we really did with the compliance program is not so much update the approach, but ensure that we were covering new ideas or items that had not been incorporated since the previous revision. So for example, we looked more at electronic systems and updated that information within the compliance program. You know, what would we be looking at? How would we be looking at it, for example? So it's not so much that the approach has changed, but some of the areas that we might be looking at, we've updated just to be consistent with what is occurring in industry at this time related to clinical trials and other types of sponsor inspections.
Okay, is there a difference in type or frequency between PV inspections for generics or new drugs?
So again, I'll try to answer this question. I think it depends. FDA uses a risk-based approach. We don't look particularly just at that one element, if it's a NDA or a generic. We look at many data points, the risk of the product, and we also look more globally at the firm. We're not necessarily looking at just one product, but at the firm. How many products do they have, what type of products they have, and the risk of those products, and other information that we've received. So I think it's hard to answer that question just based on a comparison of generic versus NDA.
Chrissy, we have a couple questions related to recruitment and hiring. So does FDA recruit candidates from the UK? Or is it possible for a foreigner based in the EU to become an international FDA inspector?
Wow, I would love that. That would be fantastic. Unfortunately, to be hired with the US government, you do have to be a US citizen or a US national, unfortunately. So if you want to come here, that'd be great. But no, you know, somebody who is, you know, a foreigner in the EU, unfortunately, we cannot do that. So thanks for thinking of us.
I have a question related to the RRAs. Will RRAs be planned or a surprise?
So again, the RRAs will not be a surprise. The RRAs that we've conducted as part of the pilot were voluntary on the parts of the firm. So we were reaching out, I guess, requesting their participation in the RRA. So it was not a surprise. And once we got back word that they agreed to participate, then there was a further time given before we had the kickoff meetings and requested information. So also our inspections are also pre-announced for paid inspections as well. So they're not typically surprise inspections as well. So similar.
We received a few questions about audit trails. Is there guidance, re-audit trails for electronic systems, something that we can use with our IT folks? And then another question, can we say more about performing risk-based audit trail reviews of GCP, GBP systems? Then the rest of the question says that it's kind of a challenge for some of the people involved in that. So I think they want to hear from you again about audit trails.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, audit trails are really important. And here's where I'm going to show that it's really important. I'm taking out my glasses because I wanted to make sure I got the citation right here. And so we do have a regulation that deals with audit trails. So if you refer to 21 CFR Part 11, and this is specifically 11.10E, it does say in there that the use of secure computer-generated time-stamped audit trails to independently record the date and time of operator entries and actions that create, modify, or delete electronic records. So that's the requirement. Changes shall not obscure previously recorded information. So I think quality assurance professionals who are hopefully in this audience. We understand that, right? And that this audit trail documentation shall be retained, so not must, but it shall, for at least as long as that required for the subject electronic records, and shall be available for agency review and copying. So if we're coming out to take a look because it shall be available for us, it would behoove you to take a look at it before we get there. So I would really recommend that you take a look at your audit trails, make sure they make sense, that they're capturing the information that they're required to capture per the regulation. And then somebody wanted us to say it louder for the people in the back. So, hey, the people in the back. Yeah, we don't have we may have a published guidance. We have so many guidances, it's hard to keep track, but it is right there in the regulation. And so that should really be enough for your IT folks to say, yes, we do actually need to comply with this because it is in a regulation for that pertains to FDA in regards to electronic records.
So thank you. And then I'll just do one more question for you, Chrissy. Does the expectation for electronic systems access include EHR, patient health histories, and trial management systems, management of clinical and/or safety operations, for example?
Yeah, it does, to the extent that you can, right? We recognize that for some systems, you may not actually be able to give us access. Right? So in that case, we're going to do some shoulder surfing, right? Have somebody sitting there accessing the system while we're looking at it. But to the extent that you can, it really does make things easier on your staff and on our investigators to be able to have somebody show us, here's a patient record, here's where you can find the information that you're looking for. And then we can go through at our own pace and take a look at it. And those folks are free to go do other things that they need to do, right? We know everybody's incredibly busy. So to the extent that we can get access to your systems, fantastic. We know sometimes there are limitations though, and we'll work with you on that if that's the case.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, session 5 presenters. And now I'll invite the session 6 presenters up. That's Lauren, Saranjan, and Claire. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, so Lauren, we'll start with a question for you. If you're unable to find a pro code for a product, say a spray or pumps for topical application, what should be used?
That's a great question. So if I wasn't sure what pro code to use or product code for the device constituent part of my product, the first place I would go to is, unfortunately it's on my slides, there's a website that has a list of the common device types in NDAs, ANDAs, and BLAs, and check there first. There might be one that fits nicely. But if not, there is a pro code database that's searchable for both common device names and pro codes. That's also on my slides. So do check out those links. But, you know, if you just are looking for help, I would recommend reaching out to CDRH's Division of Industry and Consumer Education, or DICE. It's dice@fda.hhs.gov, and they can help to identify a pro code that aligns with your product. Or you can reach out to the Office of Combination Products and we can help you as well.
All right, thank you. Saranjan, will pre-market vaccine INDSRs be submitted via R3 to CBER IND and not EVARs? EVAERS.
So when it comes to vaccine reporting, especially for pre-market IND, when we publish our guidance, the binding guidance, then yes, you would be submitting to FAERS. So, but the post-market one still goes to EVARES. So post-market reporting is still to EVARES. The pre-market one would come to us, and it'll eventually be shared with CBER. Of course, during the period of time while you are implementing R3, you will be still submitting through ECTD. We have a mechanism to get that into FAIRS, but once you're ready with electronic submission, then the safety reporting portal as well as the gateway. Safety reporting portal will have an option to say, are you submitting for a CBER IND? And it'll take you to the appropriate form to fill it, which will come to FAIRS, and E2B-R3 will also come to FAIRS. Now, again, just to repeat, it's all for the IND safety reports. Thank you.
Lauren, I have another combination product question for you. Please expand and clarify determination of the lead centers.
Sure. So determination of the lead center or the center who is assigned to the regulation for the combination product. I mentioned that this is based on the determination of the primary mode of action, which is the single mode of action that has the greatest contribution to the overall intended therapeutic effect of that product. And my examples were very straightforward, and it does get more complex than what was on my slides. So there are situations in which that is not so cut and dry. Perhaps there's two independent modes of action. And so in that case, the lead center is determined based on the center that regulates other combination products that have similar types of safety and effectiveness questions, or if that center, there isn't a center that has that, it will be based on the center that has the most expertise that is relevant to the most significant safety and effectiveness questions of that combination product. And if you are not sure, you would like guidance from FDA, you should look into submitting a request for designation, or RFD, in which FDA will determine, which constituent part has the primary mode of action and the lead center, or a pre-RFD, which is an informal way to receive that determination. Thank you.
Saranjan, can you tell me more about submitting complaints to FAIRS?
Submitting
complaints?
Oh, complaints to FAIRS.
Yeah.
So, so we have the product quality side of FAIRS. So the product quality side, you have the FAR reporting, you have the BPDR reporting, and then we also have from the voluntary side, we have the consumer complaint reporting. So they all come into FAIRS. So the FARS reporting actually has the FARS 3331A form, I think. So that's the form which is filled and submitted to, I believe, a mailbox, and then that report is then taken into FAIRS. And then you have the BPDRs, and they also then are submitted through the mechanism that they have, which then comes into FAIRS. And the consumer complaints also go into FAIRS. So they all are in one database, and we hope someday that we will be able to have a similar type of a portal that we do for adverse event reporting, which then can be utilized to submit the FARS BPDRs, and then also utilize the same portal to be able to provide the consumer complaint that we have got, which has, believe it's a priority one. It is kind of sent, a copy of the report is sent back to the sponsors for their due diligence on that complaint. And hopefully that portal helps us to do that. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, one last one for you, Saranjan. Do we have separate FDA email contact for IND-SR pre-market product?
Now this question is such there could be multiple answers, but when it comes to IND safety reports today are submitted through electronically, but a PDF format of the MedWatch through ECTD, to the ECTD format, through the gateway. Now, if you have questions about that reporting of how it is to be reported, of course, you will write to esap@fda.hhs.gov about anything concerning with the ECTD. When we move for those safety reports from ECTD to FAIRS, then these reports will have to be either submitted through the safety reporting portal, which is again a web form, or through the electronic submission gateway, which will be the E2B, ICH E2BR3 format. They will all go into FAIRS. Now, if you have any questions then your questions will be directed to FAIRS esap@fda.hhs.gov. Now, those questions are mostly questions we would like those questions to be more on the technical aspects of things. Now, if you have anything to do with the regulatory aspect of things, then the best thing is to contact with the regulatory project manager in that therapeutic areas and ask that questions, or I think there's a mailbox to ask any kind of regulatory questions relating to, should I be submitting this? What about these types of report? And what about this condition? So that would most likely should go to the CDER's Office of Regulatory Affairs, who can answer those questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. That was great. A big round of applause for session 6 presenters. And now I think Ray, oh, there you are. Okay, Ray's going to come up with some housekeeping items.
Thank you. All right, let me move this up just a little bit. And Ray, I have to say, I love your voice. It's an awesome voice, right? I wish I had that sort of like, it's great. So, wow, it's been a full week and a bit of a whirlwind. So I really appreciate you all sticking with me till the end here. Again, my name is Laurie Muldowney, and I have the pleasure of wrapping things up this week. I understand that I'm the only thing likely between happy hour, your next meal, or traveling home, so I will try to keep it brief. But before I jump into some closing remarks, I do want to take just a few minutes to thank those who made this workshop or this symposium possible. First, I want to thank Brenda Stoddart and the team at CDER's Small Business Industry Assistance Office. I think I got that right. SBIA handled all the logistics, right? They got the conference room, they handled registration, they handled the audiovisual, really everything to make the logistics possible. And if you aren't familiar with SBIA, you really should check out their webpage on fda.gov. It's all free, and it's all intended to be resources, educational resources. They provide live and on-demand information to industry, so definitely check it out. I want to thank the Planning Committee. Planning Committee was comprised of not only staff across the FDA, but also we had Stephen Vinter and his team from MHRA, and Hossein Abid and the team from Health Canada. And the planning team really has been working for the better part of the past year, trying to develop the agenda, identify presenters for this workshop. Many of whom were also serving double duty and presented, which kind of leads me to my next thank you. I appreciate and thank our awesome presenters, our moderators, and our panelists. I think we had a lot of excellent presentations. Thank you for answering all of these questions at the end each day. It was really tremendous. And thank you to the audience for not only providing these questions, but for really staying for this. 3 days is a lot to take out of your busy schedules. We get that, but we also understand that this is a topic, and these are topics that are really important to all of us. And again, thank you to those who are actually still in the room. And finally, I want to thank our fearless workshop leader, Lakeisha Williams. Thank you, Lakeisha, in the back. Lakeisha handles so much of the planning behind the scenes. It's like herding cats is one of my favorite little sayings, but trying to get everything she needs from the presenters, from the planning committee on time in order to make the workshop possible. So Lakeisha, we could not have done it without you. So thank you again. So today we covered a variety of topics. We heard a lot of really interesting bioequivalence case studies this morning that highlighted some of the potential pitfalls in BE studies, both with clinical and on the bioanalytical side. And these case studies really underscore the need to have available the data and the records to reconstruct all of the study activities, to verify if subjects received the right sequence of drug treatments, and that the drug concentrations that are reported to our agencies are reliable. This afternoon, we heard about international collaboration in GPV, the future of pharmacovigilance inspections, and we heard safety updates from each of our agencies. But I want to try to step back and highlight a couple of the common threads from the entire workshop. So we covered 3 broad topics in 3 days. We covered good clinical practice and clinical trials, the conduct of bioavailability and bioequivalence studies, and good pharmacovigilance practices. But there were a few themes that were repeated throughout, and I'm sure these are probably not going to be a surprise to anybody. And some may sound very familiar if you heard Dr. Grandinetti's closing remarks yesterday, but I have been told that repetition is the mother of learning and the father of action. So lots of quotes here today. So perhaps being a bit redundant is not a bad thing. But first, I want to reflect on the impact of innovation and technology on both industry and regulators. On the regulatory side, we heard about leveraging technology and software to facilitate remote and on-site inspections as well as compliance activities. You know, we know that remote evaluations were essential to maintaining oversight during the COVID-19 pandemic, and they continue to be explored by all of the agencies who were represented across a variety of compliance programs. We did hear a bit about some of the challenge that regulators experience when they're conducting these remote activities, as well as some of the successes. And I think it's really great to have an open dialogue and discussion about our experiences with this new tool and how it's evolving. I think it's fair to say that we're continuing to explore how to best use this tool. I do expect that over time we're going to gain efficiencies and that we're going to better understand where the appropriate place to use this tool in the toolbox, as we like to say, is. Sorry, I have dry hands. On the industry side, during our GCP sessions, we heard about digital health technologies. We heard about clinical trials with decentralized elements, real-world evidence, and adaptive design. We're seeing increased numbers of data sources. We have complex data flow, and we're seeing the increasing use of these digital health technologies. And with all of these complexities and opportunities, I like to think, I think the most important takeaway from this entire week, potentially, is the importance of applying a proportionate and risk-based approach to the entire clinical trial lifecycle. So it's really about thinking and documenting your thinking and not using a one-size-fits-all approach. So you should incorporate quality into the design of the study, identify and appropriately manage those aspects of the trial that are critical to the protection of research participants and to generating reliable data that's essential for decision making. And this includes, of course, through the use of risk-based oversight and monitoring approaches that are tailored to the potential risks of the specific study and that are revised as needed. It's not a start at the beginning and then just run with it. You need to continue to revise and look at the information that you're gathering and continue to update your oversight and monitoring processes. In pharmacovigilance, there are also increasing sources and volumes of data. Both industry and regulators face challenges with timely and efficient collection, processing, and evaluation of the vast amount of safety information that comes in. And advances in emerging technology that we heard about earlier, including artificial intelligence and machine learning, have the potential to address some of these challenges by creating more efficiencies in pharmacovigilance systems. But again, all of this needs to be done in a risk-proportionate way, focusing on important identified risks as well as important potential risks. And we as regulators recognize the need to understand industry's use of these technologies and continue to develop approaches and policy as this landscape really evolves. The other common thread that I hope was really obvious throughout the week is the importance and really fundamental need to collaborate. The pharmaceutical industry, again, it's increasingly global and complex with multi-regional trials that are pretty standard, greater number of clinical trial sites across the globe. After approval, products are used around the world, making patient safety and pharmacovigilance a global endeavor as well. And at the same time, we've already covered some of the increased complexity that we're seeing, but I do want to mention one other area that's been raised a few times and I think is really important, and that's the growth of third-party providers who are conducting trial and post-marketing pharmacovigilance-related activities. So collaboration, including international collaboration between our regulatory agencies, is really more important now than ever. We heard over the last 3 days about the many ways that FDA, MHRA, and Health Canada collaborate, but also how we collaborate with many other foreign regulators, some of whom may be in the room or on video, and how we, as regulators, collaborate with patient groups and industry as well, and really the value that these collaborations bring. We heard a bit about ICH efforts to harmonize regulatory requirements across regions to the extent that that's possible. But even when there still may be differences in processes or even in specific legislative authorities, we're really focused on the same principles. And there's quite a lot that we agree on, as I think everybody heard this week. Regulators are leveraging international collaborations like PICS and ICMRA, as well as bilateral information sharing agreements to try to develop common standards, harmonize inspectional approaches, and exchange important information, including from inspections. Our international collaborations have improved our ability to identify data reliability and human subjects protections concerns. And importantly, they help us to optimize our use of limited regulatory resources and to extend our oversight capacity. So, and of course, meetings like this provide an excellent opportunity to promote compliance, hopefully with a pretty shared voice, which I think is awesome. This is our 4th collaborative workshop over, I think, the last 6 years, and it certainly will not be our last. So please, as you leave today, don't forget to complete surveys. Let us know if there are topics that you would like to see covered in a future workshop on GCP, BE, and PV, or if you have other recommendations that you think might make this workshop more valuable. And for those of you who have been here all week, you will understand why I felt compelled to come up with a Disney quote to send us on our way. Thankfully, Marvel is a subsidiary of Disney because I'm actually an action film girl myself. So I leave you with a quote from Black Panther, which is, "Just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved." We're in the midst of a time of fairly rapid change, and really in everything we do. And we should embrace this thoughtfully, recognize that not all of our efforts to innovate are going to be a success, and that's okay. But we should always be looking for ways to improve the way we do things. And with that, I say thank you, safe travels to those who are traveling, and we look forward to our next time together. So thank you.